The skies above New York City erupted in a cacophony of light and sound as the massive alien vessel breached Earth's atmosphere. Pedestrians froze in their tracks, mouths agape, as the sleek, iridescent craft descended through the clouds, its hull shimmering with an otherworldly energy. In Central Park, 28-year-old Isabella "Izzy" Reyes was oblivious to the unfolding spectacle. Her attention was focused solely on Max, her hulking 150-pound Tibetan Mastiff, as she affectionately scratched behind his ears. The gentle giant's tail thumped rhythmically against the grass, his eyes closed in contentment. The alien ship touched down with surprising grace on the great lawn, its landing struts barely disturbing the manicured grass. A hush fell over the gathered crowd as a hatch slid open with a soft hiss, revealing two figures silhouetted against the bright interior. Zalara Thren and Zorvax Kree emerged, their lithe, silvery forms a stark contrast to the lush greenery surrounding them. Their large, almond-shaped eyes blinked rapidly, adjusting to Earth's unfamiliar sunlight. As the alien diplomats took their first tentative steps onto terrestrial soil, their gaze fell upon Izzy and Max. The sight of the young woman casually petting the enormous canine sent a visible shudder through both extraterrestrials. Zorvax's antennae twitched nervously, while Zalara's biolight patches flared a vibrant purple, a clear sign of distress in their species. Oblivious to the alien's reaction, Izzy finally looked up from Max, her eyes widening in astonishment as she registered the otherworldly visitors. "Holy SH," she began, quickly clamping a hand over her mouth. Zalara took a hesitant step forward, her melodic voice tinged with concern as she addressed Izzy. "Human, are you in danger? Do you require assistance in subduing this ferocious beast?" Izzy blinked in confusion, then burst into laughter. "Danger? Oh no, you've got it all wrong. This is Max, my dog. He's a total softie." The aliens exchanged bewildered glances. Zorvax's voice was a low rumble as he spoke. "You mean to say this creature is not holding you captive? It is a companion?" "Exactly," Izzy grinned, giving Max another scratch. The dog's tail wagged harder, thumping against the ground with increased enthusiasm. The misunderstanding seemed to break the tension, and a ripple of nervous laughter spread through the growing crowd of onlookers. Smartphones were raised en masse, capturing the surreal scene for posterity. Zalara's biolight patches shifted to a calmer blue hue as she processed this new information. Fascinating. On our world, creatures of such size are invariably predators. The concept of a pet is alien to us. As the initial shock wore off, Izzy's natural curiosity took over. "So, welcome to Earth, I guess. I'm Izzy. Are you here to, take over the planet or something?" Zorvax's antennae drooped slightly. "Quite the contrary, Isabella Reyes of Earth. We come seeking alliance and aid." The admission hung in the air, heavy with implication. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people tried to process what they were witnessing. Izzy's brow furrowed. "Aid? You guys need our help, but you've got spaceships and probably all sorts of advanced tech. What could we possibly do for you?" Zalata and Zorvax exchanged a meaningful look before the female alien spoke again. "Your species possesses something far more valuable than mere technology, Isabella. Something our own people have lost over millennia of technological advancement." "And what's that?" Izzy asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zorvax gestured towards Max, who was now eyeing the aliens with mild curiosity. "The ability to form bonds with other species, to coexist in harmony with the natural world. These are skills we desperately need to relearn if our civilization is to survive." The gravity of the situation began to sink in for Izzy. Here she was, an ordinary woman out walking her dog, suddenly thrust into the role of Earth's impromptu ambassador to an alien race. As if sensing the weight of the moment, Max let out a soft woof, startling the aliens once more. Izzy couldn't help but giggle at their reaction. "Well," she said, a hint of mischief in her voice, "I guess the first lesson in interspecies bonding is going to be how to pet a dog 101. You guys up for it?" The aliens' expressions were a mix of trepidation and curiosity as they contemplated this unexpected first step in galactic diplomacy. And so, on a sunny afternoon in Central Park, with the eyes of the world upon them, humanity's journey towards becoming teachers to the stars began, all thanks to a woman and her very good boy. As Izzy led Zalara and Zorvax towards the hastily assembled meeting point, a buzz of anticipation filled the air. News of the alien landing had spread like wildfire, and world leaders scrambled to respond. Within hours, a delegation of Earth's finest minds had been assembled in a conference room overlooking Central Park. Dr. Julian Hart, a renowned xenobiologist, paced nervously at the head of the long table. His weathered face bore the marks of decades spent theorizing about extraterrestrial life. Beside him stood Maya Sterling, the UN's top diplomat, her crisp suit a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding outside. The door swung open, and Izzy entered, flanked by the two aliens. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Dr. Hart's eyes widened. His lifetime of research suddenly made flesh before him. Hi everyone, Izzy said, her voice wavering slightly. I'd like you to meet Zalara and Zorvax. They're not from around here. Maya stepped forward, her diplomatic training kicking in. Welcome to Earth. I'm Maya Sterling, representing the United Nations. We're honored to. She was cut off by a sudden commotion. A small terrier, belonging to one of the security personnel, had slipped into the room and was now excitedly circling Izzy's legs. The young woman instinctively bent down to pet it, much to the alien's visible distress. Isabella, Zalara's melodic voice carried a note of concern. You seem to attract these creatures. Is this some form of human superpower? Izzy laughed, scooping up the friendly dog. No superpower, just a lot of practice. I volunteer at an animal shelter. This little guy probably smells my other furry friends on me. Zorvax's antennae twitched rapidly. You willingly surround yourself with multiple species of Earth fauna? Fascinating. And they do not attempt to consume you? Dr. Hart couldn't contain himself any longer. Remarkable? Your species doesn't have domesticated animals? No symbiotic relationships with other life forms? The aliens exchanged a look of what could only be described as embarrassment. Our world once teemed with diverse life, Zorvax explained. But as our technology advanced, we grew. Disconnected. Many species were lost. Those that remain are studied from afar, never interacted with. A somber silence fell over the room. Maya cleared her throat, attempting to steer the conversation back on track. You mentioned needing our help. Perhaps if you could elaborate. She was interrupted again, this time by the arrival of a flustered young woman carrying a complex-looking device. Sorry I'm late, she exclaimed, her dark curls bouncing as she rushed in. The quantum translator needed some last-minute adjustments. Everyone, this is Ava Mitchell, Maya introduced. Our leading expert in xenolinguistics and creator of the Universal Translation Matrix. Ava's eyes sparkled with excitement as she approached the aliens. It's an honor to meet you. I've been analyzing the frequencies of your speech since your arrival. With your permission, I'd like to activate the UDM to facilitate clearer communication. Zalara and Zorvax nodded their assent, and Ava flipped a switch on her device. A soft hum filled the room, and suddenly the alien speech became crystal clear, their subtle inflections and idioms perfectly rendered in English. Extraordinary, Zalara marveled. Your species' grasp of communication is truly impressive. With the language barrier fully bridged, the meeting began in earnest. The aliens explained their dire situation. Their homeworld was facing an ecological collapse, centuries of technological progress having come at a devastating cost to their planet's biodiversity. We've mastered interstellar travel, Zorvax said, a note of shame in his voice. But we've forgotten how to live in harmony with our own world. Our scientists believe that reintroducing diverse life forms and learning to coexist with them could be key to restoring balance. Dr. Hart leaned forward, his scientific curiosity piqued. And you think humans can help with this? Our track record with the environment isn't exactly stellar." Izzy, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Maybe that's exactly why we can help. We've made a lot of mistakes, but we're learning from them. We're trying to do better." To emphasize her point, she gestured to a window where a flock of pigeons had landed on a nearby ledge. "Look at that. In the middle of this concrete jungle, life finds a way. We're surrounded by it, even if we don't always notice." The aliens watched in fascination as a brave pigeon hopped closer to the window, pecking curiously at its own reflection. Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Izzy's right. Our relationship with nature is complex, but it's something we grapple with every day. Perhaps that struggle is exactly what your people need to reconnect with your world." As the discussion continued, it became clear that this unexpected alliance could benefit both species. Humans would gain access to advanced alien technology and the opportunity to prevent their own world from following a similar path of ecological destruction. In return, they would share their hard-won wisdom about coexisting with nature. Ava's translator hummed softly in the background, bridging not just linguistic gaps, but cultural ones as well. With each translated idiom and clarified concept, the two species grew closer to understanding one another. As the meeting drew to a close, Zalara turned to Izzy. "Isabella Reyes, would you consider acting as a cultural ambassador for your species? Your innate connection with Earth's creatures could be invaluable in our learning process." Izzy blinked in surprise, looking around at the assembled experts and leaders. "Me? But I'm not a scientist or a diplomat." Dr. Hart smiled warmly. "Sometimes, my dear, the most profound teachers are those who lead by example. Your compassion and natural affinity for interspecies bonds could be exactly what our new friends need." As Izzy contemplated this unexpected turn of events, a butterfly fluttered in through an open window, landing delicately on her shoulder. The aliens watched in awe, their earlier fear replaced by a glimmer of hope. In that moment, it became clear that this unlikely alliance might just hold the key to saving not one world, but two. As the meeting progressed, Zalara and Zorvax began to elaborate on their mission, their words flowing smoothly through Ava's translator. The assembled humans listened intently, their expressions a mix of fascination and concern. "Our world, Zephyria, once boasted biodiversity rivaling that of Earth," Zalara explained, her biolite patches pulsing a somber blue. "But our quest for technological advancement came at a terrible cost. We isolated ourselves from nature, viewing it as something to be conquered rather than nurtured." Zorvax nodded, his antennae drooping slightly. "Over millennia, we lost countless species. Those that survived became increasingly hostile, evolving defenses against our technology. Now, the few remaining life forms on Zephyria are so dangerous that we dare not approach them." Dr. Hart leaned forward, his scientific curiosity piqued. "But surely with your advanced technology, you could find ways to study and interact with these creatures safely." The aliens exchanged a look that could only be described as embarrassment. "We've tried," Zorvax admitted, "but our attempts have been less than successful. We've become so disconnected from the natural world that we lack the basic instincts and understanding necessary for such interactions." As if to emphasize their point, a sparrow landed on the windowsill, chirping loudly. Both aliens visibly flinched, their bodies tensing as if preparing for an attack. Izzy couldn't help but chuckle. "It's just a little bird, guys. It's not going to hurt you." The alien's disbelief was palpable. Zalara's voice was filled with wonder as she asked, "How do you do it? How do you coexist so casually with these unpredictable life forms?" Before anyone could respond, a new voice cut through the room. "It's not always casual, and it's certainly not easy." All eyes turned to Ethan Graves, a rugged wildlife conservationist who had been quietly observing from the corner. Ethan stood, his weathered face a testament to years spent in the field. "Humanity's relationship with nature is complex. We've made plenty of mistakes, and we're still learning. But we've also developed strategies and understanding over thousands of years of coexistence." He approached the window, gently encouraging the sparrow onto his finger. The aliens watched in awe as the tiny bird perched there, completely at ease. "It's about respect, patience, and understanding," Ethan continued. "We study animal behavior, learn their patterns, and adapt our own actions accordingly. It's a constant give and take." Maya nodded appreciatively. "Ethan's pragmatic approach could be invaluable to your people. Perhaps a cultural exchange program. We could send experts like Ethan to Zephyria to help your scientists redevelop these skills." The suggestion sparked excited murmurs around the room. However, one voice cut through the chatter, its tone laced with concern. "Before we get ahead of ourselves," said Lumiara Voss, a xenobiologist who had been furiously taking notes, "I think we need more information about Zephyria's current wildlife. You mentioned they've become extremely dangerous." Zalara's biolight shifted to a cautionary yellow. "Indeed. The creatures that have survived on our world have developed formidable defenses. Some can emit electromagnetic pulses that disable our technology. Others have evolved toxins that can eat through our strongest materials." A hush fell over the room as the implications sank in. Lumiara pressed on, her scientific curiosity overriding her apprehension. "Can you give us a specific example?" Zorvax's antennae twitched nervously. "There's a species we call the voltaic prowler. It's roughly the size of your tigers, but with the ability to generate and project powerful electrical fields. Our last research team that encountered one. Well, let's just say their protective suits weren't as protective as we'd hoped." Dr. Hart whistled low. "Sounds like your wildlife has essentially evolved into living weapons against your technology." "Precisely," Zalara confirmed. "It's as if nature itself is rejecting us, punishing us for our centuries of neglect." Ethan stroked his chin thoughtfully. "It's not punishment, it's adaptation. These creatures have evolved to survive in the world you've created. The challenge now is learning to coexist with them." Izzy, who had been quietly absorbing all this information, suddenly perked up. "Wait a second. What if that's the key? Maybe you don't need to start with the super dangerous animals. What if we help you reintroduce some of Earth's more friendly species to your world?" The room buzzed with excitement at the idea. Maya turned to the aliens, her diplomatic training kicking in. "Of course, we'd need to carefully consider the ecological impact of introducing non-native species to your planet. But in principle, it could be a way to help your people relearn how to interact with wildlife in a controlled, safer environment." Zelaya and Zorvax conferred quietly, their antennae intertwining in what seemed to be a gesture of agreement. "Your proposal has merit," Zorvax said finally. "It could indeed serve as a stepping stone towards reclaiming our connection with nature." As the discussion continued, plans began to take shape. A team of Earth's top biologists, conservationists, and animal behaviorists would travel to Zephyria, bringing with them a carefully selected group of Earth animals. In return, Zephyrian scientists would share their advanced technology, particularly in the fields of sustainable energy and environmental restoration. Izzy found herself at the center of it all. Her natural affinity for animals and her unexpected role in First Contact, making her an ideal candidate to lead the cultural exchange. As the meeting drew to a close, Dr. Hart approached Izzy, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "Well, my dear, it seems you've gone from dog walker to interplanetary ambassador in the span of a day. How does it feel?" Izzy laughed, a mix of nervousness and exhilaration bubbling up inside her. "Honestly, it feels like the start of the craziest adventure of my life." Little did she know just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The news of the alien arrival and their plea for help spread across the globe like wildfire. Social media platforms exploded with hashtags like #AliensNeedUs and #InterstellarAliens trending worldwide. News channels ran 24/7 coverage, with experts from various fields weighing in on the implications of this unprecedented event. Public reaction was a mix of excitement, fear, and skepticism. Some embraced the idea of helping an alien civilization, seeing it as humanity's chance to prove its worth on a cosmic scale. Others worried about the potential dangers of engaging with an advanced extraterrestrial species. Conspiracy theorists had a field day, spinning wild tales of alien deception and hidden agendas. Amidst the global frenzy, governments and scientific institutions scrambled to form a unified response. The United Nations convened an emergency session, establishing the Interstellar Cooperation Initiative HFY to coordinate Earth's efforts in this new alliance. At the heart of these discussions was the challenge posed by Zephiria's dangerous wildlife. Earth's top minds in biology, ecology, and animal behavior were brought together to brainstorm solutions. It was during one of these high-level meetings that Sophie Langston, a brilliant young ethologist known for her unconventional approaches, made a suggestion that would change the course of the mission. "We're thinking about this all wrong," Sophie announced, her eyes bright with inspiration. "We shouldn't just be sending in scientists and conservationists. We need a diverse team that can approach this problem from multiple angles." The room fell silent as Sophie continued, her words picking up pace with her excitement. "Think about it. We're not just dealing with dangerous animals. We're dealing with an entire ecosystem that's evolved to be hostile to intelligent life. We need experts in fields we might not expect, people who understand complex systems, risk management, even game theory." Dr. Hart nodded thoughtfully. "An interdisciplinary approach. It makes sense. What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Langston?" Sophie grinned. "An interspecies task force. We bring together not just biologists and animal behaviorists, but also engineers, psychologists, martial artists, even professional animal trainers. People who understand how to navigate unpredictable, high-risk situations." The idea took root quickly. Within days, the HFY had greenlit the formation of the Zephirian Wildlife Interaction and Coexistence Task Force (ZWICT), and at the center of it all, much to her own surprise, was Izzy Reyes. Izzy's natural affinity for animals, combined with her unexpected role in First Contact, made her the ideal candidate to lead the mission. However, the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders as she began her intensive preparation. Her days became a whirlwind of activity. Mornings were spent in physical training, pushing her body to its limits under the guidance of ex-military fitness instructors. Afternoons were dedicated to crash courses in xenobiology, studying the limited data available on Zephirian life forms. "Remember," Dr. Hart would often remind her, "everything you know about Earth animals may not apply. We're dealing with creatures that have evolved under completely different conditions." Evenings found Izzy in long strategy sessions with Sophie Langston and other ZWICT members, developing protocols for encountering unknown species. They ran countless simulations, each more challenging than the last. "You can't just rely on your instincts," Sophie warned during one particularly grueling session. "Your intuition about animal behavior is based on Earth fauna. We need to retrain your responses for potentially hostile alien wildlife." Between training sessions, Izzy worked closely with Ava Mitchell, mastering the use of the advanced translation technology. They spent hours fine-tuning the device to pick up on the subtle biolite cues that formed a crucial part of Zephirian communication. "Language isn't just about words," Ava explained. "For the Zephirians, those light patterns are as important as vocal inflections are to us. Misreading them could lead to dangerous misunderstandings." As the weeks passed, Izzy found herself transforming. The carefree dog walker was replaced by a focused, determined leader. She absorbed knowledge at an astonishing rate, her mind expanding to encompass concepts she'd never dreamed of before. But it wasn't all serious business. Ethan Graves made sure to include lighter moments in their training, recognizing the importance of maintaining morale. He organized team-building exercises that often involved working with Earth animals, from herding sheep to swimming with dolphins. "Never underestimate the power of joy in connecting with other species," Ethan reminded them. "Even on Zephyria, finding moments of wonder could be key to our success." As the launch date approached, final preparations kicked into high gear. The team carefully selected a small menagerie of Earth animals to bring along domesticated species chosen for their docility and ability to adapt to new environments. Each animal underwent rigorous health checks and behavioral assessments. Izzy spent time with each creature, forming bonds and understanding their unique personalities. "They're not just test subjects," she insisted to the scientific team. "They're our ambassadors, our partners in this mission." The night before the scheduled departure, Izzy found herself in Central Park, at the spot where she'd first encountered Zalara and Zorvax. Max, her faithful Tibetan Mastiff, sat beside her, his presence a comforting reminder of home. As she gazed up at the stars, the enormity of what she was about to undertake finally hit her. She was about to leave Earth, to journey to an alien world filled with unimaginable dangers. The fate of 2 planets could rest on her shoulders. "What do you think, Max?" she whispered, scratching behind his ears. "Am I crazy for doing this?" Max responded with a soft woof and a gentle lick to her hand. Izzy smiled, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "You're right," she said, standing up with renewed determination. "We can do this. After all, if a girl and her dog can make friends with aliens, anything's possible." As she walked back home for her last night on Earth, Izzy felt a mix of trepidation and exhilaration. Tomorrow, she would embark on the greatest adventure of her life, a journey that could reshape the future of 2 worlds. Launch day arrived with a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. The sprawling launch complex, hastily constructed on the outskirts of New York, buzzed with activity as final preparations were made. The Zephyrian ship, a gleaming marvel of alien technology, stood ready to carry the Zwick team across the stars. Izzy arrived early, her heart pounding with a cocktail of excitement and fear. She was greeted by Luke Donovan, the team's aerospace engineer and resident expert on Zephyrian technology. "Morning, Captain," Luke said with a grin, his Irish lilt evident despite his attempt at formality. "Ready to make history?" Izzy laughed, grateful for the moment of levity. "As ready as I'll ever be. How's our ride looking?" Luke's eyes lit up with boyish enthusiasm. "She's a beauty, Izzy, like nothing we've ever seen before. The propulsion system alone is centuries beyond our most advanced tech. It's going to be one hell of a learning curve." As they approached the ship, Izzy marveled at its organic, almost fluid design. It seemed to shimmer in the morning light, its hull rippling like the surface of a calm lake. The rest of the team arrived in waves: scientists, conservationists, and specialists from various fields, each carrying their own mix of equipment and personal items. Dr. Hart oversaw the loading of the Earth animals, each in specially designed stasis pods to ensure their safety during the journey. As the departure time neared, Zola and Zorvax approached Izzy. Their biolite patches pulsed with what she had learned to recognize as a mix of gratitude and concern. "We cannot thank you enough for undertaking this mission," Zalara said, her melodic voice tinged with emotion. "We only hope we are not asking too much of your species." Izzy smiled reassuringly. "That's what friends do. We help each other out." With final goodbyes said and checks complete, the team boarded the alien vessel. As the hatch sealed behind them, a hush fell over the group. This was it. There was no turning back now. Luke took charge, working with Elijah Quarn, the Zephyrian engineer assigned to the mission, to familiarize the human team with the ship's systems. It quickly became apparent that this would be no easy task. "All right, folks," Luke announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous main chamber. "First things first, let's talk about gravity control. This ship doesn't use artificial gravity plates like in our sci-fi shows. Instead, it manipulates gravitational fields directly." He demonstrated by touching a shimmering panel, causing the gravity in one section of the room to shift dramatically. Several team members yelped in surprise as they suddenly found themselves floating. "Oops, sorry about that," Luke said, quickly adjusting the settings. "It'll take some getting used to. The controls are, well, let's say they're more intuitive than we're used to. You don't just push buttons, you kind of think at them." This led to a chaotic few hours as the human team attempted to master the basics of moving around the ship without accidentally sending themselves or their equipment floating across rooms. More than once, Izzy had to stifle her laughter as she watched her highly educated colleagues flailing about like newborn foals. Amidst the confusion, Izzy noticed Alicia Quarn watching the proceedings with a mixture of amusement and concern. The Zephyrian engineer was accompanied by several small, floating creatures that Izzy had initially mistaken for some kind of advanced drones. Curious, Izzy approached Alicia. "Those are fascinating," she said, gesturing to the floating beings. "Are they part of the ship's systems?" Alicia's biolight patches flickered with surprise. "Oh no, these are light. Well, I suppose you might call them pets, though that doesn't quite capture their role in our society." As if on cue, one of the light drifted towards Izzy. It was about the size of a softball, with a translucent body that pulsed with soft, colorful light. Without hesitation, Izzy held out her hand, allowing the creature to settle gently onto her palm. The light's light pulsed in a soothing rhythm, and Izzy felt a wave of calm wash over her. She smiled up at Alicia. "They're beautiful, and they seem very intuitive." Alicia's patches glowed with a warm orange hue, a sign of pleasure. Izzy had learned. "You're the first human to interact with them, so, naturally, most of your colleagues seem wary." Izzy glanced around, noticing that indeed, many of the other team members were giving the light a wide berth. "I guess I've always had a knack for connecting with animals, or in this case, alien life forms. They remind me a bit of biolite jellyfish we have on Earth, actually." This simple interaction seemed to break down some invisible barrier. Other Zephyrians on board, who had been keeping a polite distance, began to approach, their own light floating alongside them. Seeing an opportunity, Izzy called out to her team. "Hey everyone, come meet the light. They're friendly, I promise." Slowly, cautiously, the human team members began to interact with the floating creatures. Sophie Langston was particularly fascinated, already taking notes on her tablet about their behavior patterns. As the ice broke, Luke managed to corral everyone's attention once more. "Right, now that we've had our successful first contact on board, let's get back to our crash course in alien tech, shall we? Next up, how to use the food synthesizers without accidentally creating something that'll turn your insides out." The journey was off to a rocky start, but as Izzy watched her team slowly acclimate to their new environment, she felt a surge of hope. If they could learn to navigate this ship and bond with these alien creatures, perhaps they really could tackle the challenges waiting for them on Zephyria. As the Earth grew smaller in the ship's viewing portals, Izzy took a deep breath. Their great adventure was truly beginning, and she was determined to face whatever lay ahead with the same open mind and heart that had brought her this far. After weeks of interstellar travel, the Zephyrian ship pierced the atmosphere of its home planet. As they descended, the Zwick team crowded around the viewing portals, eager for their first glimpse of this alien world. What greeted them was far from the advanced utopia many had imagined. The landscape below was a patchwork of desolation and wild, untamed wilderness. Vast stretches of barren land were punctuated by dense, alien forests with trees that seemed to pulse with an inner light. In the distance, the remnants of once great cities stood as silent testaments to a civilization in retreat. "It's not what I expected," Dr. Hart murmured, his voice tinged with a mixture of awe and concern. Zalara's biolight patches pulsed a somber blue. "Our world has changed much in recent centuries. The balance we once maintained with nature has been disrupted." As the ship touched down in a clearing on the outskirts of a Zephyrian settlement, the team began their final preparations. They donned specially designed environmental suits, a precaution against any unfamiliar pathogens or atmospheric differences. Izzy took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "All right, team, remember your training. We stick together, stay alert, and approach everything with caution and respect." As the hatch opened, they were hit by a wave of humid, slightly metallic-smelling air. The gravity was noticeably lighter than Earth's, causing a few team members to stumble as they took their first steps on alien soil. Krithos Engar, the Zephyrian wildlife expert assigned to guide them, led the way. His tall, willowy frame moved with a grace that belied his obvious nervousness. "We must be cautious," he warned, his translator conveying the tremor in his voice. "The creatures here have grown unpredictable." They hadn't ventured far from the ship when they encountered their first example of Zephyria's evolved fauna. A plant-like organism, roughly the size of a small car, unfurled what appeared to be leaves but crackled with visible electrical energy. "Voltaic vines," Krithos explained, giving the organism a wide berth. "They can discharge enough electricity to power a small city, or disable our most advanced technology." The team carefully navigated around the voltaic vines, their earlier excitement now tempered with a healthy dose of caution. As they pressed deeper into the alien wilderness, the signs of a world at odds with its dominant species became increasingly apparent. Suddenly, Krithos froze, his entire body going rigid. "There," he whispered, his voice barely audible through the translator. "The shadow strike, our most feared predator." The team followed his gaze, and collective gasps of awe and terror rippled through the group. At the edge of a nearby clearing stood a creature that defied easy description. It was roughly the size of a rhinoceros, but with a sleek, almost liquid-like body that seemed to absorb light. 6 powerful limbs ended in wickedly curved claws, and its head was adorned with multiple eyes that glowed with an eerie intelligence. "Nobody move," Ethan whispered, his years of experience with Earth's predators kicking in. "No sudden movements." The shadow strike turned its head towards them, its multiple eyes focusing with unnerving precision. Krithos let out a small whimper of fear, his biolite patches flashing a frantic warning pattern. But while her teammates tensed in fear, Izzy felt an unexpected emotion bubbling up inside her: curiosity. Yes, the creature was terrifying, but it was also breathtakingly beautiful in its alien way. She found herself studying its movements, the way its body seemed to ripple and shift as it observed them. "Izzy," Sophie hissed, noticing her friend's intense focus. "What are you doing?" "Look at its eyes," Izzy whispered back, her voice filled with wonder rather than fear. "There's intelligence there. It's not just seeing us, it's studying us." As if in response to her words, the shadow strike tilted its head slightly. For a brief moment, Izzy felt a connection, a flash of mutual curiosity between two species encountering each other for the first time. The moment was broken by a high-pitched screech from somewhere in the forest. The shadow strike's head snapped towards the sound, and in a motion almost too fast to follow, it melted into the shadows of the trees, disappearing from view. A collective sigh of relief swept through the team, but Izzy found herself oddly disappointed by the creature's departure. "That was intense," Luke said, breaking the silence. "I think I need to recalibrate our defensive systems. A lot." Krithos was still trembling, his patches pulsing with residual fear. I've never been this close to one before. How did you remain so calm?" he asked Izzy, a note of awe in his voice. Izzy shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "I guess I was too fascinated to be scared. It was beautiful, in its own way." Dr. Hart chuckled, shaking his head in amazement. "And that, my friends, is why Izzy is leading this mission. That ability to see beauty and possibility where others see only danger. That's what we're here to learn." As they continued their exploration, the team remained on high alert, but there was a subtle shift in their approach. Izzy's curiosity had sparked something in them, all a reminder that they were here not just to face dangers, but to understand and connect with a world that had become alien even to its own inhabitants. The first encounter with the Shadow Strike had set the tone for their mission. It would be challenging, often terrifying, but also filled with wonders beyond their imagination. And as they ventured deeper into the alien wilderness, Izzy felt a growing determination. They would find a way to help the Zephyrians reconnect with their world, no matter what obstacles they might face. As the team set up their base camp on the outskirts of the Zephyrian settlement, the encounter with the Shadow Strike remained at the forefront of everyone's minds. Dr. Hart and Sophie Langston worked tirelessly to collate data from their initial observations, while Luke Donovan focused on enhancing their protective gear to withstand the unique threats of this alien ecosystem. Izzy called a team meeting to discuss their next steps. "We need more information about the shadow strike," she announced. "It's clearly a key species in this environment, and understanding it could be crucial to our mission." Krithos and Gar, still visibly shaken from their earlier encounter, spoke up. "Observing the shadow strike is extremely dangerous. Our own attempts have often ended in tragedy." "That's why we're going to do it differently," Izzy replied, her voice filled with determination. "We'll use Earth techniques adapted for this environment." The team spent the next few days preparing for their first official observation attempt. They selected a location near where they had first spotted the creature, setting up a camouflaged blind that incorporated Zephyrian technology to mask their scent and heat signatures. As they settled into position, Vic Sullivan, the team's wildlife photographer and videographer, began setting up his equipment. Vic was known for his unorthodox approaches to capturing footage of Earth's most elusive creatures, and he was clearly in his element. "This is going to be epic," Vic grinned, his weathered face alight with excitement. "Imagine the first high-resolution images of an alien apex predator." Hours passed with no sign of the shadow strike. The team took turns keeping watch, but as the alien sun began to set, casting an eerie purple glow across the landscape, spirits were starting to flag. Suddenly, Ethan Graves held up a hand for silence. "Look," he whispered, pointing to a shadowy area between two BioLite tree-like structures. The shadow strike emerged from the darkness, its liquid-like body seeming to absorb the fading light. As it moved into a small clearing, the team got their first clear, prolonged look at the creature. Its 6 limbs moved with uncanny grace, each step calculated and silent. The multiple eyes that had unnerved them earlier now revealed their purpose. They constantly scanned in all directions, making it nearly impossible to approach the creature undetected. But it was the shadow strike's skin that truly captivated them. In the dim light, they could see that it wasn't just absorbing light, it was adapting to its surroundings. The creature's body shifted and changed, mimicking the patterns and textures around it with astonishing accuracy. "Incredible," Dr. Hart breathed. "It's not just camouflage, it's active mimicry on a level we've never seen before." Vic was in his element, his cameras whirring softly as he captured every movement. But as the shadow strike began to move away, Vic made a decision that would leave the entire team in awe. "I need to get closer," he whispered, already reaching for his handheld camera. Before anyone could stop him, Vic slipped out of the blind. Moving with a stealth born from years of tracking Earth's most dangerous predators, he began to inch closer to the shadow strike. Izzy's heart raced as she watched Vic navigate the alien terrain. He moved in a stop-motion pattern, freezing in place whenever the shadow strike's gaze swept in his direction. The alien members of the team watched in disbelief. Krithos's BioLite patches pulsed with a mix of fear and amazement. "How is he doing that?" he whispered. "The shadow strike should have detected him by now." Ethan, despite his own concern, couldn't help but smile. "That's Vic for you. Man's got ice water in his veins and moves like a ghost when he needs to." As Vic drew closer, the shadow strike suddenly went rigid. For a heart-stopping moment, the team thought it had spotted him. But then they realized the creature wasn't looking at Vic, it was looking past him. From the shadows emerged another shadow strike, slightly smaller, but no less intimidating. The two creatures began to interact in a way that seemed almost playful. Vic, seizing the opportunity, managed to position himself behind a large, fern-like plant. From this vantage point, he had an unobstructed view of the two shadow strikes as they engaged in what appeared to be some kind of social behavior. For the next hour, the team watched in awe as Vic documented the shadow strike's interactions. They observed complex communication through subtle shifts in body patterns, vocalizations that were more felt than heard, and displays of agility that defied their understanding of physics. When the shadow strikes finally melted back into the forest, Vic carefully made his way back to the blind. As he entered, he was met with a mixture of relieved sighs and excited whispers. "Vic, that was..." Izzy began, struggling to find the right words. Bloody insane, Luke finished for her, shaking his head in disbelief. Vic just grinned, holding up his camera. Wait till you see what I got. This is going to change everything we thought we knew about these creatures. As they began to review the footage, even the Zephyrian members of the team were astounded. Krithos stared at the images in wonder. In all our years of study, we've never gotten this close, never seen them interact like this. Dr. Hart nodded, his eyes gleaming with scientific excitement. This footage is invaluable. The social behaviors, the communication methods, it's clear these creatures are far more complex than anyone realized. Izzy felt a surge of hope. This is exactly what we needed. If we can understand these creatures, really understand them, maybe we can find a way for the Zephyrians to coexist with them. As the team excitedly discussed their observations and planned their next steps, Izzy couldn't help but feel they'd just taken a giant leap forward in their mission. They had faced one of Zephyria's most feared predators and come away not with terror, but with knowledge and a growing sense of wonder. The path ahead was still fraught with danger, but for the first time since their arrival, it also seemed filled with possibility. As they packed up their equipment and prepared to return to base camp, Izzy knew that this was just the beginning of their journey to bridge the gap between two worlds. However, not everyone shared her enthusiasm. Zorvax Kree, who had been monitoring their progress from the Zephyrian settlement, called an urgent meeting with the team. Your recent actions have been concerning, Zorvax began, his antennae twitching with agitation. While we appreciate your dedication, you must understand the gravity of the situation. The Shadow Strikes are not merely animals to be studied. They are apex predators that have evolved specifically to counter our most advanced defenses. Izzy listened respectfully, but couldn't hide the spark of excitement in her eyes. I understand your concerns, Zorvax, but isn't this exactly why we're here? To bridge the gap between your people and the wildlife of Zephyria? Zorvax's biolite patches flared a warning red. Bridge the gap? Isabella, these creatures have killed some of our most experienced researchers. They are not to be underestimated. The tension in the room was palpable. Dr. Hart cleared his throat, attempting to mediate. Perhaps we can find a middle ground. We need to continue our research, but we should also respect the Zephyrians' experience with these creatures. Nora Bennett, the team's risk assessment specialist, had been quietly taking notes throughout the exchange. She stood up, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere. If I may, Nora began, her voice steady and measured, I believe I have a proposal that might address both our need for closer study and the very real dangers we face. All eyes turned to Nora as she pulled up a holographic display of the surrounding area. I've been analyzing the data from our encounters and the Zephyrian records. There are patterns to the Shadow Strike's behavior that we can use to our advantage. She highlighted several areas on the map. These zones show the highest frequency of Shadow Strike activity. However, they also correspond to areas with dense concentrations of those biolite tree structures we've observed. Nora zoomed in on one particular section. I propose we set up a series of observation posts here. The biolite flora seems to interfere with the Shadow Strike's camouflage abilities, making them more visible. Additionally, we can use modified versions of the Zephyrian force field technology to create safe zones within the observation areas. As Nora detailed her plan, the tension in the room began to dissipate. Even Zorvax seemed impressed by the thoroughness of her approach. This could work, Zorvax admitted reluctantly. But I must insist that no one attempts to make direct contact with the Shadow Strikes. Observation only. Izzy nodded, though a part of her couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment. The desire to get closer to these fascinating creatures was growing stronger by the day. Over the next week, the team worked tirelessly to implement Nora's plan. Luke and the Zephyrian engineers collaborated to modify the force field technology, creating invisible barriers that would allow for observation while keeping the team safe from potential attacks. As the observation posts were set up, Izzy found herself spending more and more time watching the shadow strikes. She meticulously recorded their behaviors, noting patterns in their movements and interactions. The more she observed, the more convinced she became that these creatures were far more than simple predators. One evening, as the alien sun set and the biolite flora began to glow more intensely, Izzy witnessed something extraordinary. A pair of shadow strikes engaged in what could only be described as a dance. Their liquid-like bodies flowed and intertwined, creating patterns that mimicked the glowing plants around them. "It's not just hunting or territorial behavior," Izzy explained excitedly to the team during their nightly debriefing. "There's a complexity to their interactions that suggests a high level of intelligence and social structure." Dr. Hart nodded thoughtfully. "Your observations align with some of the data we've been collecting on their vocalizations. There are patterns that suggest a sophisticated form of communication." As the discussion continued, Izzy found her mind wandering, imagining what it would be like to communicate with these creatures, to truly understand them. She was snapped back to reality by Ethan's voice. "Izzy, I know that look," he said, a note of concern in his voice. "You're thinking about getting closer, aren't you?" Caught off guard, Izzy hesitated before responding. I just feel like we're missing something, like there's a key to understanding them that we can't quite grasp from behind these barriers." Nora frowned. "Izzy, the safety protocols are in place for a reason. We can't risk." I know," Izzy interrupted, holding up her hands in surrender. "I'm not suggesting we abandon the protocols. I just think we need to start considering ways to establish some form of contact. Controlled, safe contact." The team exchanged uneasy glances. They had all seen Izzy's growing fascination with the shadow strikes, and while they shared her scientific curiosity, there was an undercurrent of worry about where this fascination might lead. "Let's take it one step at a time," Dr. Hart suggested diplomatically. "We'll continue with our current observation plan and reassess in a few days. If we can present solid evidence of higher intelligence and potential for communication to Zorvax and the Zephyrian Council, they might be more open to the idea of closer contact." Izzy nodded, but inside, her mind was already racing with ideas. She knew the risks, understood the fears of her teammates and the Zephyrians, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the key to their entire mission, the reconnection between the Zephyrians and their world, lay in understanding these magnificent creatures. As the meeting adjourned and the team prepared for another night of observation, Izzy found herself standing at the edge of the force field, gazing out into the glowing alien forest. In the distance, she caught a glimpse of a shadow strike moving through the underbrush, its body shimmering with reflected light. "I'll find a way to understand you," she whispered, more to herself than to the distant creature. "Somehow, I'll bridge this gap." Little did Izzy know that her determination to connect with the shadow strikes would soon lead the team into uncharted and dangerous territory, testing the limits of their mission and their understanding of this alien world. The research facility buzzed with activity as the team settled into their third week on Zephyria. Data poured in from the observation posts, and the excitement of new discoveries permeated the air. However, an undercurrent of tension remained, fueled by Izzy's growing desire for closer contact with the shadow strikes and the Zephyrians' persistent wariness. On this particular evening, Izzy was engrossed in analyzing recent footage when alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red warning lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow as Kai Morgan's voice crackled over the intercom. "Breach in Sector 7. Shadow Strike has penetrated the outer defenses. This is not a drill. All personnel, initiate emergency protocols immediately." Chaos erupted as team members scrambled to secure sensitive equipment and make their way to designated safe rooms. Izzy's heart raced as she sprinted towards the central control room, knowing that's where she could be most useful. She burst through the doors to find Kai furiously working at a holographic interface, his fingers flying over the controls. "Vornak Sil, The Zephyrian security chief stood nearby, his BioLite patches pulsing a frantic red. "How did it get through?" Izzy demanded, joining Kai at the console. Kai shook his head, frustration evident in his voice. "It found a weak point in the force field. The creature's adaptive camouflage allowed it to mimic the energy signature and slip through. I've never seen anything like it." On the monitors, they watched as the Shadow Strike moved through the facility with terrifying speed and grace. Its liquid-like body flowed around obstacles, and its multiple eyes scanned in all directions, making it nearly impossible to track. "We must terminate the creature," Vornak insisted, reaching for what appeared to be a weapon. "It's too dangerous to be allowed to roam free in the facility." "No," Izzy shouted, surprising even herself with the vehemence in her voice. "We can't kill it. This is an opportunity to learn, to understand." Vornak's patches flashed with anger and disbelief. "Learn? Understanding? This beast has breached our defenses and threatens all our lives." As they argued, the Shadow Strike continued its advance, drawing closer to areas where team members were sheltering. Izzy's mind raced, trying to find a solution that would protect both her team and the fascinating creature. Suddenly, an idea struck her. "Kai, the BioLite plants, can we replicate their light patterns inside the facility?" Kai's eyes widened with understanding. "Theoretically, yes. We could use the facility's lighting systems to mimic the patterns, but why?" "Do it," Izzy commanded, "and give me control of the internal force fields." As Kai worked to reconfigure the lights, Izzy explained her plan. "The Shadow Strike is used to navigating through the BioLite forests. If we can recreate that environment inside the facility, we might be able to guide it to a containment area." Vornak looked skeptical, but didn't object as Izzy began manipulating the internal force fields, creating a pathway lined with simulated BioLite patterns. Moments later, the facility's lights shifted, bathing the corridors in an otherworldly glow that mimicked the alien forest. The effect was immediate. The Shadow Strike paused, its body rippling as it adjusted to the new environment. "It's working," Kai breathed, watching the monitors intently. "It's following the light patterns." Izzy guided the creature through the facility, using the force fields to block off alternate routes and gently nudge it towards a large, reinforced chamber originally designed for studying volatile Zephyrian plant specimens. As the Shadow Strike entered the chamber, Izzy held her breath. With a final adjustment of the force fields, she sealed the creature inside, the energy barrier shimmering into place. For a moment, silence reigned in the control room. Then, as if a spell had been broken, a flurry of activity erupted. Kai initiated full containment protocols while Vornak called off the security alert. Izzy approached the monitor displaying the contained Shadow Strike. The creature moved about the chamber, its body reflecting and refracting the simulated BioLite in mesmerizing patterns. "Incredible," she murmured. "It's not even trying to escape. It seems curious about its new environment." Vornak joined her, his earlier anger replaced by a grudging amazement. "I've never seen one this close without it attacking. How did you know it would respond this way?" Izzy smiled, her eyes never leaving the monitor. "I didn't know for certain, but from our observations, it was clear that the Shadow Strikes have a complex relationship with their environment. I suspected that recreating a familiar setting might calm it." As they watched, the Shadow Strike began to interact with the light patterns, its body shifting and changing in what almost seemed like a display of contentment. "This changes everything," Kai said, joining them at the monitor. "The level of intelligence and adaptability it's displaying. It's far beyond what we initially theorized." Vornak's BioLite patches pulsed with a mix of emotions, lingering fear, but also a growing curiosity. Perhaps we have been too quick to view these creatures as mere beasts," he admitted reluctantly. Izzy nodded, a surge of excitement coursing through her. "This is our chance to truly understand them, to find a way for your people to coexist with the wildlife of your world." As the immediate crisis subsided and the rest of the team gathered to witness their unexpected guest, Izzy felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced one of Zephyria's most feared predators and emerged not with tragedy, but with an unprecedented opportunity for study and understanding. However, as she gazed at the contained shadow strike, a nagging thought tugged at the back of her mind. They had succeeded in capturing the creature, but what would be the consequences of removing such an apex predator from its natural habitat? And how would they proceed with their study while ensuring both the safety of the team and the well-being of this magnificent being? These questions would soon lead Izzy and her team into uncharted ethical and scientific territory, pushing the boundaries of their mission and their understanding of interspecies cooperation. In the days following the Shadow Strike's dramatic entrance into the research facility, a palpable tension hung in the air. The team was divided between those exhilarated by the unprecedented opportunity for close study and those still shaken by the breach of their defenses. Izzy found herself at the center of heated debates as she pushed for direct contact with the contained Shadow Strike. Her proposal was met with a mix of enthusiasm and stark opposition. "This is madness," Vornak Sil argued during one particularly intense meeting. "We've managed to contain it, yes, but direct contact? It's far too dangerous." Dr. Julian Hart, however, saw the potential. "The data we've gathered since the containment is extraordinary. The creature's behavior suggests a level of intelligence we hadn't even considered before. If we could establish some form of communication." Zorvax Kree, joining via holographic projection, remained skeptical. "The risks outweigh the potential benefits. We cannot endanger the team or the mission for what might be a futile attempt at communication with a predator." As the arguments raged on, Izzy quietly worked with Kai and Dr. Hart to develop a protocol for safe interaction. They designed a special suit that would mimic the Shadow Strike's adaptive camouflage, theorizing that it might make the creature more receptive to contact. After days of heated discussion and meticulous planning, a compromise was reached. Izzy would be allowed one attempt at direct contact, under strictly controlled conditions and with multiple safety measures in place. The morning of the planned encounter, Izzy stood before the containment chamber, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She was encased in the specially designed suit, its surface shimmering and shifting to match her surroundings. "Remember," Dr. Hart's voice crackled through her earpiece, "we're not sure how it will react to your presence. At the first sign of aggression, we're pulling you out." Izzy nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "Understood. I'm ready." As the force field lowered to allow her entry, Izzy stepped into the chamber. The simulated biolight environment cast an ethereal glow over everything, making her feel as if she'd stepped into an alien dream. The Shadow Strike, which had been resting in a far corner, immediately became alert. Its multiple eyes focused on Izzy, studying her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Slowly, carefully, Izzy began to move deeper into the chamber. She kept her movements fluid and non-threatening, mimicking the graceful motions she'd observed in the Shadow Strike's natural habitat. To everyone's surprise, the creature didn't retreat or show signs of aggression. Instead, it seemed curious. It began to move towards Izzy, its liquid-like body flowing across the chamber floor. "Incredible," Dr. Hart murmured through the calm. "Its body language doesn't match any of the hunting or defensive postures we've observed. It's displaying entirely new behavior." As the Shadow Strike drew closer, Izzy's suit began to react, its surface rippling in patterns that seemed to resonate with the creature's own shifting form. The Shadow Strike paused, its multiple eyes blinking in what appeared to be surprise. Then, something extraordinary happened. The creature began to emit a series of low, thrumming vocalizations. The sound was more felt than heard, vibrating through Izzy's body. "Are you getting this?" Izzy whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Every bit," Kai responded. "The frequencies, they're unlike anything we've recorded before." For the next hour, Izzy and the Shadow Strike engaged in a silent dance of observation and mimicry. The creature would shift its form or emit a series of vibrations, and Izzy would do her best to respond in kind. As the session came to an end and Izzy reluctantly prepared to leave the chamber, The Shadow Strike did something utterly unexpected. It extended one of its limbs, gently touching the surface of Izzy's suit. The contact lasted only a moment, but it sent a jolt of excitement through everyone observing. Once safely out of the chamber, Izzy was met with a barrage of questions and exclamations from her teammates. But it was Dr. Hart's analysis that truly captured the significance of what had transpired. The vocalizations, the body language, the final contact, it all points to one incredible conclusion, Dr. Hart explained, his eyes shining with excitement. The Shadow Strike wasn't just reacting to you, Izzy. It was actively trying to communicate. This revelation sent shockwaves through the team. Even the skeptical Zephyrians were forced to reconsider their understanding of these creatures. If they're capable of this level of communication, Nora Bennett mused, it raises serious ethical questions about how they've been treated in the past. Vornak Sill, who had watched the entire encounter with growing amazement, spoke up. This changes everything. If we can establish meaningful communication with the Shadow Strikes, perhaps we can find a way to coexist peacefully. As the team excitedly discussed the implications of this breakthrough, Izzy found herself drawn back to the observation window. The Shadow Strike had returned to its resting position, but she could have sworn it was watching her, its multiple eyes reflecting an intelligence that they were only beginning to understand. "We've only scratched the surface," Izzy murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "There's so much more to learn." This successful first contact marked a turning point in the mission. It opened up new avenues of research and raised profound questions about the nature of intelligence and interspecies communication. But it also presented new challenges. How would they build on this initial connection? And how would they translate this understanding into practical solutions for the Zephyrians? As night fell on the alien world, Izzy knew that their journey had only just begun. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential dangers and incredible discoveries. But one thing was clear: their understanding of Zephyria and its inhabitants would never be the same again. The days following the initial contact with the Shadow Strike were a whirlwind of activity. The team worked tirelessly to analyze the data from Izzy's encounter, developing new theories about the creature's intelligence and communication methods. Izzy, driven by an almost obsessive curiosity, spent every available moment observing the Shadow Strike, noting its behaviors and attempting to decipher its complex vocalizations. As the team's understanding grew, so did Izzy's conviction that closer contact was not only possible but necessary for true breakthrough. Her proposal to attempt physical contact with the Shadow Strike was met with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "This is unprecedented," Zalara Thrin argued during a tense meeting. "Never in our history has anyone voluntarily touched a Shadow Strike and lived to tell the tale." Dr. Hart, however, supported Izzy's proposal. "If we're ever going to bridge the gap between your species and Zephyria's wildlife, we need to take bold steps. Izzy has already demonstrated a unique ability to connect with the creature." After much debate and careful planning, a date was set for the attempt. The team spent days preparing, enhancing Izzy's protective suit and developing emergency protocols. Tension mounted as the appointed time drew near. On the morning of the attempt, Izzy stood before the containment chamber, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. The specially designed suit hugged her body, its surface shimmering with an array of biolight patterns meant to mimic the Shadow Strike's own communication signals. "Remember," Dr. Hart's voice came through her earpiece, "at the first sign of aggression, we're pulling you out. Your safety is paramount." Izzy nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "Understood. I'm ready." As the force field lowered, Izzy stepped into the chamber. The Shadow Strike, which had been resting in a far corner, immediately became alert. Its multiple eyes focused on her, studying her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Slowly, deliberately, Izzy began to move towards the creature. She kept her movements fluid and non-threatening, mimicking the graceful motions she'd observed in their previous encounters. The Shadow Strike watched her approach, its liquid-like body rippling with what Izzy had come to recognize as curiosity. As she drew closer, Izzy began to emit a series of low, thrumming vocalizations that the team had synthesized based on their recordings. The Shadow Strike's reaction was immediate. It tilted its head, its multiple eyes blinking rapidly as it processed this new development. Then, to everyone's amazement, the creature responded with its own series of vocalizations. The sound vibrated through Izzy's body, carrying with it a complexity of tones and frequencies that no human voice could replicate. "Incredible," Kai's voice whispered through the calm. "The patterns? They're similar to what we've recorded during non-aggressive interactions between Shadow Strikes." Encouraged by this response, Izzy continued her approach. She was now mere feet away from the Shadow Strike, closer than any human or Zephyrian had ever been to a conscious, unrestrained specimen. In the observation room, Zalara and the other aliens watched with a mixture of fear and fascination. Their biolite patches pulsed with a riot of colors, reflecting their turbulent emotions. "She's too close," Vornak muttered, his hand hovering over the emergency protocols. "We should extract her now." But Zalara, her eyes fixed on the scene before them, held up a hand. "Wait," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "Look at how it's responding to her. I've never seen anything like this." Inside the chamber, Izzy had come to a stop just an arm's length from the Shadow Strike. For a moment, neither moved. They simply observed each other, human and alien predator locked in a silent exchange. Then, slowly, Izzy raised her hand. The Shadow Strike's eyes followed the movement, its body tensing slightly. But it didn't retreat. It didn't attack. It waited. With her heart pounding so loudly, she was sure the creature could hear it. Izzy extended her hand towards the Shadow Strike. Time seemed to slow as her fingers approached the creature's shimmering surface. In the observation room, everyone held their breath. Zalara's patches pulsed a bright, anxious blue. Dr. Hart leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. And then, it happened. Izzy's gloved hand made contact with the Shadow Strike's body. The creature's surface rippled at her touch, but it didn't pull away. Instead, it leaned into the contact, its multiple eyes blinking in what could only be described as curiosity. A collective gasp echoed through the observation room. Zalara's patches flared with a brilliant, awestruck purple. "Impossible," she breathed. For Izzy, the moment of contact was transformative. She could feel the Shadow Strike's body pulsing beneath her hand, a living, thinking being so alien yet somehow familiar. The creature's surface shifted beneath her touch, patterns of light and color flowing across its skin in mesmerizing waves. As she stood there, hand resting on the alien predator, Izzy felt a connection forming. It was nothing as dramatic as a psychic link or sudden understanding. Rather, it was a quiet moment of mutual recognition, two intelligent beings acknowledging each other across the vast gulf of their differences. The Shadow Strike, seeming to sense the significance of the moment, emitted a low, thrumming vocalization. The sound resonated through Izzy's body, carrying with it a complexity of tones that seemed to convey curiosity, caution, and perhaps even a hint of acceptance. As Izzy finally, reluctantly, withdrew her hand, the Shadow Strike did something utterly unexpected. It extended one of its limbs, gently brushing against Izzy's suit in a mirror of her own gesture. In that moment, Izzy knew that everything had changed. They had not just touched a Shadow Strike, they had made a connection. A bridge had been formed between two worlds, opening up possibilities that neither humans nor Zephyrians had ever dared to imagine. As she exited the chamber, Izzy was met with a barrage of questions and exclamations. But it was Zalara's reaction that truly captured the magnitude of what had transpired. The Zephyrian approached Izzy, her patches pulsing with a mix of awe and something akin to hope. "You have done the impossible," Zalara said, her voice filled with emotion. "You have touched the untouchable and lived. Perhaps there is hope for our world after all." As the team celebrated this groundbreaking achievement, Izzy found her gaze drawn back to the containment chamber. The Shadow Strike watched her through the barrier, its multiple eyes reflecting an intelligence that they were only beginning to understand. This was just the beginning, Izzy knew. They had opened a door, but the path ahead was still long and uncertain. Yet as she stood there, still feeling the echo of the Shadow Strike's touch, Izzy felt a surge of determination. They would find a way to bridge the gap between the Zephyrians and their world's wildlife, and in doing so, they might just reshape the future of two species. In the weeks following Izzy's groundbreaking contact with the Shadow Strike, the research facility buzzed with an electric atmosphere of discovery and possibility. Izzy's sessions with a creature, now affectionately dubbed Shade by the team, grew longer and more complex. Each interaction revealed new facets of the Shadow Strike's intelligence and communication abilities. Dr. Hart and his team worked tirelessly to decode the intricate patterns of vocalizations and biolight displays that Shade used to communicate. They developed a rudimentary translation matrix, allowing for basic exchanges of concepts between human and Shadow Strike. "It's extraordinary," Dr. Hart explained during one of their daily briefings. "The Shadow Strikes don't just communicate. They have a rich, complex language that conveys abstract concepts. They're not just predators, they're philosophers in their own alien way." Izzy's success had a profound impact on the entire team, none more so than Maya Sterling. The diplomat, inspired by the breakthrough with Shade, began to push for expanded interaction with other Zephyrian species. "If we can communicate with the apex predator," Maya argued, "imagine what we could learn from the other native fauna. We need to broaden our approach." Despite some initial hesitation from the Zephyrian members of the team, Maya's proposal gained traction. Soon, the research facility was abuzz with new projects aimed at understanding and interacting with a variety of Zephyrian creatures. Ethan Graves led an expedition to study the voltaic vines, developing specialized equipment to safely interact with the electrically charged plants. Sophie Langston focused on a species of airborne creatures dubbed floaters, delicate beings that seemed to communicate through complex aerial dances. As the scope of their research expanded, so did the challenges they faced. The team had to constantly adapt their methods and safety protocols to deal with the unique characteristics of each new species they encountered. One particularly memorable incident occurred during Maya's attempt to establish contact with a group of burrowing creatures the team had named tunnelers. Despite careful preparations, the interaction went awry when the tunnelers unexpectedly breached the facility's lower levels, causing a temporary evacuation. "We got cocky," Maya admitted during the post-incident briefing. "We assumed our success with Shade would translate easily to other species. We need to remember that each of these creatures is unique, with its own set of behaviors and potential dangers." The incident served as a sobering reminder of the risks involved in their work. It also highlighted an unforeseen consequence of their expanded interactions. The more they engaged with Zephyria's wildlife, the more they disrupted the delicate balance of the local ecosystem. Krithos Engar, the Zephyrian wildlife expert, voiced his concerns during a tense meeting. "We're interfering with natural behaviors. The tunnelers have never burrowed this close to settlements before. Our presence, our interactions, they're changing things in ways we can't fully predict." This realization led to heated debates about the ethics of their research and the potential long-term impacts on Zephyria's ecosystem. The team found themselves grappling with difficult questions. How much intervention was too much? Were they helping the Zephyrians reconnect with their world, or were they inadvertently causing more harm? Amidst these discussions, Izzy's work with Shade continued to progress. The bond between human and Shadow Strike deepened, revealing new layers of complexity in the creature's intelligence and emotional capacity. During one session, Izzy made a breakthrough that would reshape their understanding of the Shadow Strikes. Using the rudimentary translation matrix, she managed to convey a series of images and concepts related to the Zephyrians' fear of the Shadow Strikes. Shade's response was unexpected and profound. The creature's body rippled with patterns that the team had come to associate with sadness and frustration. Through a combination of vocalizations and biolight displays, Shade conveyed a startling message. The Shadow Strikes were not inherently aggressive towards the Zephyrians. Their attacks had been defensive, a response to perceived threats as the Zephyrians expanded into their territories. "This changes everything," Izzy breathed as she relayed the information to the team. "The Shadow Strikes don't want to harm the Zephyrians. They're trying to protect themselves, their homes." This revelation sent shockwaves through the research team and the Zephyrian representatives. It offered a glimmer of hope for true coexistence between the Zephyrians and their world's apex predators. However, it also raised new ethical dilemmas. How could they convey this understanding to the wider Zephyrian population? And more pressingly, what were the implications for Shade? The Shadowstrike had been in captivity for weeks, separated from its natural habitat and its own kind. As the team grappled with these questions, a new challenge emerged. Readings from their long-range sensors indicated increased Shadowstrike activity in the areas surrounding the research facility. It seemed that Shade's prolonged absence had not gone unnoticed by its fellow predators. Izzy found herself torn between her growing bond with Shade and the realization that keeping the creature in captivity might be causing unforeseen ripple effects in the local ecosystem. The team's success in communication had opened up new possibilities, but it had also led them into uncharted ethical territory. As they prepared to face these new challenges, Izzy couldn't help but wonder, in their quest to bridge the gap between species, had they inadvertently created new rifts? And how could they balance their scientific curiosity and desire to help the Zephyrians with their responsibility to the complex ecosystem they were studying? The answers to these questions would shape the next phase of their mission, pushing the boundaries of interspecies cooperation and forcing them to confront the far-reaching consequences of their actions on this alien world. As the team grappled with the ethical implications of their expanding research, a new avenue of exploration emerged. Dr. Hart proposed introducing the concept of domestication to the Zephyrians, hoping it might offer a path towards peaceful coexistence with their world's wildlife. The idea was met with a mix of curiosity and skepticism from the Zephyrian members of the team. Zalara Thrin, in particular, seemed perplexed by the notion. "Domestication?" she asked, her biolite patches pulsing with confusion. "You mean to subjugate these creatures, to bend them to our will?" It quickly became apparent that the cultural gap in understanding animal-humanoid relationships was wider than they had anticipated. Ava Mitchell, recognizing the potential for misunderstanding, stepped forward to bridge the communication gap. "It's not about subjugation," Ava explained, her voice calm and measured. "Domestication is a mutual relationship, a partnership between species that benefits both." Using her advanced translation algorithms, Ava worked to convey the nuanced concepts of companionship, symbiosis, and mutual adaptation. She drew upon examples from Earth's history, showing how humans and animals had evolved together over thousands of years. "Think of it as a dance," Ava suggested, using holographic projections to illustrate her points. Both partners moved together, adapting to each other's rhythms over time. As understanding began to dawn, excitement rippled through the Zephyrian team members. Terazi Mir, a young Zephyrian biologist who had been quietly observing until now, spoke up. "So, these relationships on your world, they're not just about utility, there's an emotional component?" Terazi's patches flickered with a mix of curiosity and something akin to longing. Izzy, seeing an opportunity, shared stories of her experiences with dogs, cats, and other domesticated animals on Earth. She described the bonds of loyalty, affection, and trust that could form between humans and their animal companions. The concept seemed to resonate deeply with Terazi. To have such a connection with another species. "It sounds beautiful," she admitted, her voice tinged with wonder. Encouraged by this response, the team proposed a controlled experiment. They would attempt to introduce Terazi to some of the less dangerous Zephyrian creatures, under careful human guidance. The first attempt took place in a specially prepared habitat within the research facility. Terazi, clad in protective gear but visibly nervous, stood at the edge of an enclosure housing a group of small, iridescent creatures the team had dubbed glowmites. Izzy stood beside Terazi, offering reassurance. "Remember, they can sense your emotions. Try to stay calm and project openness." Terazi nodded, her patches pulsing with a mix of anxiety and determination. Slowly, she extended a hand towards the nearest glowmite. The creature, about the size of a tennis ball, hovered cautiously nearby, its body emitting a soft, pulsating light. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the glowmite began to drift closer. Its light shifted, matching the rhythm of Terezi's biolite pulses. As it gently brushed against her outstretched hand, Terezi let out a gasp of wonder. I can feel its energy," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's not just touching me physically, it's resonating with me." Over the next few hours, Terezi's interactions with the glowmites grew more confident. She learned to mimic their light patterns, engaging in a silent dance of biolite that seemed to delight the small creatures. The success of this first session led to more ambitious attempts. Under the watchful eyes of Ethan Graves and Sophie Langston, Terezi was introduced to progressively larger and more complex Zephyrian species. Each interaction brought new challenges and revelations. The team discovered that many Zephyrian creatures were far more receptive to connection than they had initially believed. It wasn't that these animals were inherently aggressive. They had simply never been approached with openness and empathy before. As Terezi's confidence grew, so did her bond with the creatures. She began to develop her own techniques for communication, blending Zephyrian biolite signals with the body language she had learned from observing the humans. "It's like discovering a whole new sense," Terezi explained excitedly after a particularly successful session with a group of floaters. "I've studied these creatures my whole life, but I never truly understood them until now." The implications of these developments were profound. If Terezi, with no prior experience in animal bonding, could make such progress in a short time, what might be possible for Zephyrian society as a whole? However, as with all their endeavors on this alien world, unforeseen complications arose. During one session with a more aggressive species of burrowing creature, Terezi's newfound confidence led her to push too far, too fast. The resulting incident, while not seriously injuring anyone, served as a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in their work. "We must not forget that these are wild creatures," Vornaxil cautioned during the post-incident briefing. "Our desire for connection must be balanced with respect for their nature and their space." This incident sparked heated debates among the team. Some argued for a more cautious approach, while others pushed for accelerated efforts to introduce domestication concepts to the wider Zephyrian population. Amidst these discussions, Izzy found herself returning often to the containment area where Shade, the Shadowstrike, resided. As she watched the apex predator move with fluid grace, she couldn't help but wonder, could the principles of domestication ever apply to such a creature? And more importantly, should they? The question of Shade's future loomed large. The bond between Izzy and the Shadowstrike had deepened, but keeping such a creature in captivity indefinitely raised serious ethical concerns. As the team grappled with these complex issues, news arrived that would dramatically shift the focus of their mission. Reports from Zephyrian outposts indicated increasing Shadowstrike activity in areas far from their usual territories. It seemed that the capture of one of their kind had not gone unnoticed by the apex predators. The team now faced a critical juncture. Their efforts to foster understanding between Zephyrians and their world's creatures had yielded promising results, but had also set in motion events they couldn't have anticipated. As they prepared to face this new challenge, one thing was clear: the true test of their mission to bridge the gap between species was only just beginning. The urgent message came in the middle of the night, jolting the research team from their sleep. A group of Shadowstrikes had been spotted on the outskirts of Nyxara, a major Zephyrian settlement located just 50 miles from the research facility. Panic spread quickly as reports flooded in of the apex predators moving closer to the populated areas. Izzy, still groggy from sleep, felt a surge of adrenaline as she absorbed the gravity of the situation. This was the moment that would test everything they had learned, everything they had worked for. As the team assembled in the command center, tension filled the air. Zorvax Kree's holographic projection flickered to life, his antennae twitching with anxiety. "We must act quickly," he urged. "The settlement's defenses won't hold against a coordinated Shadowstrike attack." Izzy's mind raced, piecing together everything she had learned from her interactions with Shade. "We can't treat this as an attack," she insisted. Remember what we've learned, the shadow strikes aren't inherently aggressive. They're responding to something. Ethan Graves nodded in agreement. Izzy's right. This behavior is unprecedented. We need to understand why they're approaching the settlement before we can decide how to respond. As the team debated potential courses of action, Krithos Ingar spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. What if? What if they're looking for the one we captured? For Shade? A hush fell over the room as the implications of this theory sank in. If the Shadow Strikes were indeed searching for their missing kin, the situation was even more delicate than they had realized. Izzy's heart raced as an idea began to form. We need to communicate with them, she said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. And I think I know how. Her plan was audacious and risky. Using the communication techniques they had developed with Shade, Izzy proposed leading a small team to the edge of the Nyxara settlement to attempt direct contact with the approaching Shadow Strikes. It's too dangerous, Vornak Sil protested. We can't risk human lives on such an uncertain gambit. But Ethan and Krithos rallied behind Izzy's plan. It's our best chance to prevent a catastrophe, Ethan argued. And with our combined expertise in wildlife behavior and Zephyrian ecology, we stand the best chance of success. After intense debate, the plan was approved, but with one significant modification insisted upon by Dr. Hart. Shade goes with you, he said firmly. If these Shadow Strikes are indeed searching for their kin, having Shade present could be crucial to peaceful communication. As the team rushed to prepare, Izzy felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. The fate of the Nyxara settlement, and possibly the entire future of Zephyrian wildlife relations, rested on the success of this mission. Within hours, Izzy, Ethan, and Krithos were en route to Nyxara, accompanied by a heavily sedated Shade in a specially designed transport pod. As they approached the settlement, they could see the flickering force fields that marked its boundaries, and beyond them, the shadowy forms of multiple Shadow Strikes moving in the alien forest. Remember, Izzy said as they prepared to disembark, we're not here to confront or control. We're here to listen and communicate. The team moved cautiously to a clearing just outside the settlement's force field. Izzy's heart pounded as she activated the device that would gradually bring Shade out of sedation. Everything hinged on the apex predator's reaction to its kin. As Shade began to stir, the nearby Shadow Strikes became visibly agitated. Their liquid-like bodies rippled with patterns that Izzy recognized as a mix of excitement and wariness. Taking a deep breath, Izzy stepped forward, her specially designed suit glowing with biolite patterns meant to mimic Shadow Strike communication. She began to emit the low, thrumming vocalizations they had learned from Shade, trying to convey concepts of peace and understanding. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, one of the wild Shadow Strikes began to approach, its multiple eyes fixed on Izzy with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "Stay calm," Ethan murmured encouragingly. "You're doing great." As the Shadow Strike drew closer, Izzy could feel the creature's presence like an electric charge in the air. She continued her vocalizations, willing the creature to understand. Suddenly, Shade, now fully awake, let out a series of complex vocalizations. The approaching Shadow Strike froze, its body rippling with what Izzy interpreted as surprise and recognition. What followed was unlike anything the team had ever witnessed. Shade and the wild Shadow Strike engaged in a rapid exchange of vocalizations and biolite displays. The other Shadow Strikes in the forest began to move closer, drawn by the communication. "It's working," Krithos whispered in awe. "They're actually talking to each other." Izzy, emboldened by this success, took a risk. She slowly approached Shade's transport pod and, with trembling hands, deactivated the force field containing the creature. "Izzy, what are you doing?" Ethan hissed, alarm evident in his voice. "Showing trust," Izzy replied, her eyes never leaving the Shadow Strikes. As Shade emerged from the pod, Izzy held her breath. This was the moment of truth. If she had misinterpreted the situation, she had just released an apex predator mere feet from herself and her team. But Shade didn't attack. Instead, it moved to stand beside Izzy, its body shifting to mirror her posture. Together, human and Shadowstrike faced the wild creatures. The next few hours were a blur of intense communication. Izzy, with Shade's help, managed to convey the concept that the Zephyrians wanted to coexist peacefully. The wild Shadowstrikes, in turn, expressed their concerns about encroachment on their territories and the capture of one of their own. As dawn broke over the alien landscape, a tentative understanding had been reached. The Shadowstrikes agreed to withdraw from the settlement's vicinity, and Izzy promised to work towards establishing protected areas for the creatures. As the team prepared to return to the research facility, exhausted but elated, Izzy faced a difficult decision. Shade had played a crucial role in averting disaster, but it was clear that the creature longed to return to its own kind. With a heavy heart but a sense of rightness, Izzy made her choice. "It's time for you to go home," she said softly to Shade, running her hand along its shimmering surface one last time. As they watched Shade disappear into the alien forest with its kin, Izzy felt a mix of sadness and hope. They had taken an enormous risk, but in doing so, they had opened a door to true coexistence between the Zephyrians and their world's most feared predators. The crisis had been averted, but Izzy knew their work was far from over. As they headed back to the research facility, her mind was already racing with plans for the next phase of their mission. The path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time, it seemed truly possible to bridge the gap between two worlds. In the weeks following the Nyxara incident, the dynamics between humans, Zephyrians, and the native fauna of the alien world shifted dramatically. Izzy's successful communication with the wild Shadowstrikes had opened new avenues for research and cooperation, but it also brought unforeseen complications. The research team found themselves at the center of intense scrutiny from both Earth and Zephyrian authorities. While many hailed their breakthrough as a monumental step towards interspecies cooperation, others expressed concern about the potential risks of closer interaction with such dangerous creatures. Izzy, in particular, found herself navigating a complex web of expectations and responsibilities. Her growing connection with the Shadowstrikes, especially her bond with Shade, had proven invaluable to the mission. However, it also raised questions about her objectivity and the ethical implications of such a close relationship with a study subject. During one particularly heated team meeting, Dr. Hart addressed the elephant in the room. "Izzy, your ability to communicate with the Shadowstrikes is unprecedented and invaluable. But we need to consider the long-term implications. Are we crossing a line in our interactions with these creatures?" Izzy bristled at the implication, but knew the concern was valid. "I understand the risks," she replied, "but this connection is what's allowing us to make real progress. We can't back away now." The debate was interrupted by an excited Sophie Langston bursting into the room. "You all need to see this," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with the fervor of discovery. Sophie led the team to her lab, where holographic displays showed a series of complex patterns and frequencies. "I've been analyzing the data from our interactions with various Zephyrian species," she explained, "and I think I've found something extraordinary." As the team gathered around, Sophie manipulated the displays, overlaying communication patterns from different species. "Look at this," she said, pointing to recurring motifs in the data. There are underlying similarities in the communication methods of vastly different Zephyrian creatures. Dr. Hart leaned in, his scientific curiosity piqued. "Are you suggesting some kind of universal language?" Sophie nodded excitedly. "Not exactly a language, but more like a common root, a foundational method of communication that's evolved differently across species but retains core elements." This revelation sparked a flurry of activity. The team began to develop a new approach to interspecies communication, one that sought to tap into these common elements. Sophie's discovery, combined with Izzy's intuitive understanding of the Shadowstrikes, led to rapid advancements in their translation algorithms. As their ability to communicate with Zephyrian fauna improved, so did their understanding of the complex ecosystem they were studying. They discovered that many species, not just the Shadowstrikes, had been reacting defensively to Zephyrian expansion. The animals weren't inherently aggressive. They were trying to protect their habitats and communities. This understanding led to a shift in their approach to the mission. Instead of focusing solely on helping the Zephyrians control their world's wildlife, they began to explore ways to create harmonious coexistence. Izzy found herself at the forefront of these efforts, often venturing into the field to test new communication methods. Her growing ability to speak with various Zephyrian species made her an invaluable asset, but it also placed her in increasingly dangerous situations. During one expedition to a Shadowstrike territory, Izzy's connection with the creatures was put to the test. A young Shadowstrike, injured and scared, lashed out at the research team. Without hesitation, Izzy stepped forward, using her understanding of Shadowstrike behavior to calm the creature and allow the team to treat its wounds. The incident was a success, but it highlighted the risks Izzy was taking. Vornak Sil voiced his concerns during the post-mission debrief. "Your actions were brave, Izzy, but reckless. We can't rely on your personal connection with these creatures to ensure the team's safety." Izzy knew he had a point, but she also felt a deep sense of responsibility to the creatures she had come to understand. "I know it's risky," she admitted, "but these connections are crucial. We're not just studying these animals, we're building a bridge between species." As the debate raged on, a new challenge emerged. The team's successes had not gone unnoticed by various factions on both Earth and Zephyria. There was growing pressure to weaponize their findings, to use their understanding of Zephyrian fauna for military or economic gain. Izzy found herself torn between her scientific curiosity, her emotional connection to the creatures she studied, and her duty to the mission. The line between observer and participant had blurred, and she wasn't sure where it would lead. Amidst these tensions, a breakthrough occurred that would reshape their entire approach to the mission. During a routine communication session with a group of floaters, Sophie noticed something unusual in their behavior patterns. "They're not just responding to our signals," she realized with growing excitement. "They're building on them, creating new patterns. It's like they're trying to teach us something." This observation led to a paradigm shift in their research. Instead of simply trying to understand and communicate with Zephyrian fauna, they began to approach the interactions as a two-way exchange of knowledge. The implications were staggering. Not only could they learn from the animals, but the animals seemed eager to learn from them. It was as if, given the opportunity, the fauna of Zephyria were reaching out, trying to bridge the gap from their side as well. As the team grappled with this new understanding, Izzy felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just scientists studying an alien world, they were facilitators of a grand dialogue between species, between worlds. But with this exciting new direction came new questions and challenges. How would this two-way exchange affect the ecosystem of Zephyria? What were the ethical implications of such deep intervention in an alien world's development? And how could they ensure that this knowledge would be used for peaceful coexistence rather than exploitation? As night fell on the alien world, Izzy stood at the window of the research facility, gazing out at the biolite forest. Somewhere out there, shade and its kin roamed free. She felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but also a thrill of excitement for what lay ahead. The mission had evolved far beyond its original scope, becoming something none of them could have imagined. As they ventured into this uncharted territory of interspecies cooperation, Izzy knew that the greatest challenges and the greatest discoveries still lay ahead. As the team's understanding of Zephyrian fauna deepened and their interactions became more frequent, subtle changes in the ecosystem began to manifest. At first, these shifts were barely noticeable: a slight alteration in the migration patterns of floaters, an increase in the growth rate of certain biolite plants near their research sites. But as weeks turned into months, the cumulative effects became impossible to ignore. Izzy first noticed the changes during a routine expedition to a nearby forest. The usually vibrant undergrowth seemed muted, and the air lacked the familiar buzz of small flying creatures. "Something's off," she murmured to Ethan, who nodded grimly in agreement. Back at the research facility, Data confirmed their suspicions. The team's presence and their interactions with various species had triggered a cascade of ecological changes. Some were positive certain endangered species were thriving in areas where the team had intervened. Others were deeply concerning entire food chains were being disrupted as prey animals altered their behaviors in response to the team's activities. The revelation hit Izzy hard. She had been so focused on building bridges between species that she hadn't fully considered the wider implications of their work. As she pored over the data, a gnawing sense of guilt began to take root. Seeking guidance, Izzy approached Dr. Julian Hart in his lab. The xenobiologist was hunched over a holographic display, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Dr. Hart," Izzy began hesitantly, "I need your advice. These ecological changes, are we doing more harm than good?" Dr. Hart looked up, his eyes tired but kind. "Ah, Izzy, I've been expecting this conversation." He gestured for her to sit. "The question you're asking is one that scientists have grappled with for centuries, even on Earth. When does observation become interference? And when is interference justified?" Izzy slumped into a chair, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "I thought we were helping, bridging gaps. But what if we're just breaking everything instead?" Dr. Hart nodded thoughtfully. "It's a valid concern. But remember, ecosystems are not static. They're constantly changing, adapting. What we're seeing could be the growing pains of a new equilibrium." "But is it our place to force that change?" Izzy countered. "That," Dr. Hart said with a wry smile, "is the million-dollar question, and it's not one I can answer for you. But I can tell you this, inaction has consequences too. If we step back now, we leave the Zephyrians and their world in limbo, caught between their old ways and the new understanding we've helped foster." Izzy left Dr. Hart's lab with more questions than answers. Seeking a different perspective, she sought out Zalara Thrin. She found the Zephyrian scientist in the Arboretum, studying a newly discovered species of biolite fungi. "Zalara," Izzy called softly, not wanting to startle her. "Can we talk?" Zalara turned, her biolite patches pulsing a gentle welcome. "Of course, Izzy. What troubles you?" As Izzy explained her concerns, Zalara listened intently, her expression unreadable. When Izzy finished, the alien was quiet for a long moment. "Your worry is understandable," Zalara finally said, her voice tinged with a complexity of emotions. "For millennia, my people viewed our world's fauna as something to be feared and controlled. Your work has shown us a different path, one of coexistence and mutual understanding. But change, even positive change, is rarely without cost." Zalara gestured to the fungi she had been studying. "Look at these. They appeared in this area only after we began our research here. Are they a symptom of ecological disruption? Or are they a sign of our world healing, reclaiming a balance we had long ago destroyed?" Izzy considered this. "So you don't think we should stop our work?" "On the contrary," Zalara replied, her patches pulsing with conviction. "I believe we must continue, but with greater awareness and responsibility. We have set in motion changes that cannot be undone. Our duty now is to guide those changes as best we can, to strive for a new harmony between all the inhabitants of our world." As Izzy left the Arboretum, her mind was a whirl with conflicting thoughts and emotions. The conversations with Dr. Hart and Zalara had given her much to consider, but the weight of responsibility still pressed heavily upon her. That night, unable to sleep, Izzy found herself drawn to the observation deck. As she gazed out at the alien landscape, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A group of shadow strikes, shade among them, moved through the biolite forest with fluid grace. They paused at the edge of the clearing, their multiple eyes seeming to focus on the research facility. In that moment, Izzy felt a profound connection, not just to the shadow strikes, but to the entire ecosystem of this alien world. She realized that their mission had evolved into something far greater than they had initially imagined. They weren't just bridging the gap between Zephyrians and their world's fauna. They were participating in the reshaping of an entire planet's ecological and cultural future. The path ahead was fraught with challenges and ethical dilemmas, but as Izzy watched the shadow strikes disappear back into the forest, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had a responsibility to guide this change as best they could, to strive for a future where all species could coexist in harmony. As the first light of the alien dawn began to paint the sky, Izzy made a decision. They would continue their work, but with a new focus on understanding and mitigating the ecological impacts of their presence. It would be a delicate balance, but one that could potentially lead to a brighter future for all inhabitants of Zephyria. With this resolution in mind, Izzy turned from the window, ready to face the new day and the challenges it would bring. The journey ahead would be difficult, but she was determined to see it through, for the sake of both the world they had come to study and the one they called home. The research facility buzzed with an undercurrent of tension as the team gathered for their weekly strategy meeting. The initial excitement of their breakthroughs had given way to heated debates about the future direction of their work. At the center of this conflict were two opposing viewpoints, each championed by passionate advocates. Vic Sullivan, emboldened by their recent successes, had become increasingly vocal about accelerating their domestication efforts. "We're on the cusp of something revolutionary," he argued, his eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. "Imagine Zephyrian cities where humans, aliens, and native fauna coexist harmoniously. We have the power to make that a reality." On the other side of the debate, Izzy and Nora Bennett advocated for a more measured approach. "We've already seen unintended consequences from our interventions," Nora pointed out, gesturing to the charts displaying ecological shifts. "Pushing too hard, too fast could have disastrous results." Izzy nodded in agreement. "Our primary goal should be understanding and coexistence, not reshaping this world to fit our ideals." The room was divided, with team members aligning themselves with one side or the other. Dr. Hart attempted to mediate, but the underlying tension remained palpable. The conflict came to a head during a crucial experiment involving a species of avian-like creatures the team had dubbed skygliders. These large, graceful beings had shown remarkable intelligence and a curiosity towards the research team. Vic saw them as the perfect candidates for more intensive domestication efforts. "They're naturally drawn to us," Vic argued during the experiment briefing. "With the right approach, we could establish a bond similar to what humans have with birds of prey on Earth." Izzy frowned, unconvinced. "The skygliders are a keystone species in their ecosystem. Altering their behavior could have far-reaching consequences." Despite the concerns raised by Izzy and Nora, the experiment was approved to proceed under controlled conditions. A specially designed aviary was constructed, and a small group of skygliders was carefully transported to the facility. On the day of the experiment, tension hung heavy in the air. Vic, clad in a specially designed suit that mimicked the skygliders' biolite patterns, entered the aviary. His goal was to establish a close bond with one of the creatures, demonstrating the potential for domestication. Initially, the experiment seemed to be going well. The skygliders showed interest in Vic, circling him curiously and responding to his mimicked communication signals. Vic's face was alight with triumph as he slowly extended his arm, encouraging one of the creatures to perch. But as the skyglider approached, something went wrong. Perhaps it was a miscalculated movement or a misinterpreted signal, but suddenly the creature let out a piercing shriek. The sound sent the other skygliders into a frenzy, their powerful wings creating chaos in the enclosed space. Vic, caught in the middle of the maelstrom, struggled to maintain his composure. "It's all right," he shouted over the comm link. "I can handle this." Izzy, watching from the observation room, saw the situation deteriorating rapidly. The skygliders' distress was escalating, and their powerful beaks and talons posed a serious threat to Vic. "We need to abort," Izzy said firmly, turning to Dr. Hart. "This is getting out of hand." Dr. Hart nodded grimly and gave the order to end the experiment. But as the team moved to extract Vic, the situation took an unexpected turn. One of the skygliders, in its panic state, managed to activate the aviary's emergency release mechanism. The roof retracted, and in a burst of movement, the creatures took to the open sky. Alarms blared as the team scrambled to respond to this new crisis. Vic was quickly extracted, shaken but largely unharmed. But the damage was done. The skygliders, a species with a complex role in the Zephyrian ecosystem, were now loose in an environment they had never encountered before. In the chaotic aftermath, recriminations flew. Vic, his earlier confidence shattered, lashed out defensively. If we had been allowed to pursue more aggressive bonding techniques from the start, this wouldn't have happened. Izzy, struggling to maintain her composure, shot back. This is exactly why we advocated for caution. We're dealing with complex, intelligent beings, not pets to be trained. As the argument escalated, Dr. Hart stepped in. "Enough," he shouted, his voice cutting through the din. "What's done is done. Right now, we need to focus on containing this situation before it spirals further out of control." The team fell silent, the gravity of the situation sinking in. They had crossed a line, and now they had to face the consequences of their actions. Izzy took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly. "We need to track those skygliders," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. "And we need to do it without causing further disruption to the ecosystem." Nora nodded, already pulling up holographic maps of the surrounding area. "I'll start running simulations on their likely dispersal patterns." As the team mobilized to address the immediate crisis, Izzy couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. This incident had exposed the deep rifts within the team and the inherent risks of their work. More than that, it had demonstrated how quickly their well-intentioned efforts could spiral out of control. Looking out at the alien sky where the skygliders had disappeared, Izzy realized that they had reached a critical juncture in their mission. The choices they made in the coming days would not only determine the fate of the escaped skygliders, but could well shape the future of human-alien wildlife relations on Zephyria. With a mix of determination and trepidation, Izzy turned back to her team. They had a long night ahead of them, and the real challenges were only just beginning. As the team grappled with the aftermath of the skyglider incident, a new discovery was about to shake the foundations of their understanding. Seraphine Lux, a quiet but highly intuitive xenolinguist who had recently joined the team, noticed something unusual during her analysis of Shadowstrike communication patterns. "There's a complexity here that we've been missing," Seraphine explained, her eyes alight with excitement as she presented her findings to the team. "These aren't just instinctual responses or simple communication. There's a layered structure, almost like abstract thought." The team listened with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity as Seraphine laid out her theory. She believed that the Shadowstrikes possessed a form of intelligence far beyond what they had initially assumed, possibly rivaling or even surpassing human cognitive abilities in some areas. Dr. Hart leaned forward, his scientific curiosity piqued. "That's a bold claim, Seraphine. What evidence do you have to support this?" Seraphine pulled up a series of holographic displays, showing complex patterns in the Shadowstrike's biolite communications. "Look at these recurring motifs. They're not just conveying immediate needs or threats. There are elements here that suggest long-term planning, abstract problem-solving, even what could be interpreted as philosophical concepts." The room erupted into a flurry of discussion. If Seraphine's theory was correct, it would fundamentally change their entire approach to interacting with Zephyrian wildlife, especially the apex predators. Izzy, listening intently, felt a surge of excitement. This could explain the deep connection she had felt with Shade, the sense that there was more going on behind those multiple eyes than mere animal instinct. "I think Seraphine's onto something," Izzy said, stepping forward. "In my interactions with Shade, there were moments where it seemed to grasp concepts far beyond what we'd expect from even the most intelligent Earth animals." Zalara Thrin, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "If this is true, it raises profound ethical questions about our past treatment of these creatures. We've been approaching them as animals to be managed or avoided, not as potentially sentient beings." The implications of this revelation were staggering. If the Shadowstrikes possessed this level of intelligence, it meant that the Zephyrians had been sharing their world with another sentient species all along, without realizing it. As the team debated the best way to confirm Seraphine's theory, Izzy had an idea. What if we could use my connection with Shade to test this? If we can establish a more complex form of communication, it could provide the evidence we need. The proposal was met with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Dr. Hart voiced the concern on everyone's mind. It's risky, Izzy. If we're wrong about their intelligence, you could be putting yourself in grave danger. But Izzy was determined. We need to know, and if we're right, this could be the key to true coexistence on Zephyria. After much discussion and careful planning, a new experiment was devised. Izzy would attempt to communicate with Shade and its kin using a series of complex concepts and abstract ideas, far beyond anything they had tried before. The day of the experiment arrived, and tension hung heavy in the air as Izzy prepared to enter Shadowstrike territory. She wore the latest version of their communication suit, enhanced with Seraphine's insights into Shadowstrike language patterns. As Izzy ventured into the Biolite forest, her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She didn't have to wait long before she sensed a familiar presence. Shade emerged from the shadows, its liquid-like body rippling with patterns of light. Taking a deep breath, Izzy began the communication sequence they had prepared. Through a combination of vocalizations, light patterns, and body language, she attempted to convey abstract concepts like time, causality, and even the idea of mutual cultural exchange. For a heart-stopping moment, there was no response. Then, Shade's body erupted into a dazzling display of light and color. Its vocalizations took on a complexity that Izzy had never heard before. Back at the base, the team watched in awe as their instruments recorded the exchange. Seraphine's eyes were wide with wonder. "It's not just responding," she breathed. "It's expanding on the concepts, adding layers of meaning we hadn't even considered." The exchange lasted for hours, with Shade calling other Shadowstrikes to join. It became clear that they weren't just communicating with Izzy. They were engaging in a complex dialogue among themselves, processing and discussing the new ideas she had introduced. As the sun began to set on the alien world, Izzy returned to the base, exhausted but exhilarated. The data they had gathered would take weeks to fully analyze, but one thing was immediately clear: they had grossly underestimated the Shadowstrike's cognitive abilities. In the days that followed, the implications of this discovery began to sink in. The team had to completely reevaluate their approach to interacting with Zephyrian wildlife, particularly the apex predators. They weren't dealing with animals to be studied or domesticated, but with intelligent beings capable of complex thought and possibly even culture. For the Zephyrians, the revelation was even more profound. Solara, speaking on behalf of her people, expressed a mix of awe and regret. "We have shared our world with these beings for millennia, never realizing. The harm we may have caused through our ignorance is incalculable." The discovery also raised new ethical dilemmas. How could they proceed with their mission of fostering coexistence when one party had been unaware of the other's sentience? What rights should be afforded to the Shadowstrikes and potentially other highly intelligent Zephyrian species? As the team grappled with these questions, Izzy found herself at the center of a new initiative. Her unique bond with Shade and her ability to communicate with the Shadowstrikes made her an invaluable bridge between species. "We're not just scientists anymore," Izzy realized as she looked out over the alien landscape. "We're diplomats, mediating between three intelligent species: humans, Zephyrians, and Shadowstrikes." The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges they had never anticipated. But as Izzy watched a group of Shadowstrikes moving through the distant forest, their bodies shimmering with complex patterns of light, she felt a surge of hope. They had stumbled upon something extraordinary: the chance to forge a truly interstellar community of minds. The mission to bridge the gap between species had taken an unexpected turn, opening up possibilities beyond their wildest imaginations. As night fell on Zephyria, Izzy knew that their greatest adventure was only just beginning. The revelation of the Shadowstrike's advanced intelligence sent shockwaves through both the human and Zephyrian communities. As the full implications of their discovery sank in, the research team found themselves grappling with a profound moral dilemma. During an emergency meeting called to address the situation, the tension in the room was palpable. Dr. Hart paced back and forth, his usual calm demeanor visibly shaken. "We've been operating under a fundamental misconception this entire time," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of realization. "Every interaction, every experiment, we've been treating sentient beings as subjects." Zalar Thren, her biolite patches pulsing with a mix of guilt and distress, added, "And we Zephyrians have been treating them as threats to be eliminated or contained for generations. The harm we've caused, it's unimaginable." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, each team member struggling to come to terms with the ethical implications of their work. Vic Sullivan, still defensive after the Skyglider incident, argued for maintaining a scientific approach. "Sentient or not, we can't abandon our mission. The Zephyrians still need our help to coexist with these creatures." Nora Bennett countered, her voice sharp with frustration. "But at what cost? We can't just continue as if nothing has changed. We need to completely reevaluate our methods, our goals, everything." As the debate raged on, Izzy found herself deep in thought, her mind racing with the possibilities and challenges that lay ahead. She caught the eye of Ava Mitchell, the team's diplomatic expert, who had been quietly observing the discussion. A silent understanding passed between them. Izzy stood, her movement catching the attention of the room. "I think we're looking at this all wrong," she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "We've been approaching this as a problem to solve, a gap to bridge. But what if it's not about bridging a gap at all? What if it's about recognizing that we're all part of the same community?" Ava stepped forward, building on Izzy's idea. "Izzy's right. We need to shift our entire paradigm. This isn't about humans helping Zephyrians coexist with their wildlife. It's about three sentient species learning to share a world." The room fell silent as the implications of this perspective sank in. Dr. Hart was the first to speak. "What exactly are you proposing?" Izzy took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would be controversial. "I propose we invite the Shadow Strikes to the table as equal partners in shaping the future of Zephyria." The reaction was immediate and intense. Voices rose in protest and support, the room once again descending into chaos. But Ava, drawing on her diplomatic skills, managed to bring order back to the discussion. "I know it sounds radical," Ava said, her calm voice cutting through the noise. "But consider the alternative. If we continue to treat the Shadow Strikes as subjects rather than partners, we're no better than colonizers imposing our will on their world." Zalara, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "The idea is challenging. Our people have feared the Shadow Strikes for so long. To suddenly view them as equals, as potential allies, it will not be an easy transition." "No, it won't," Izzy agreed. "But it's the right thing to do, and I believe it's our best chance for true, lasting coexistence." As the team debated the proposal, Izzy outlined her vision for a new approach. It would involve establishing direct communication channels with Shadowstrike communities, creating forums for three-way dialogue between humans, Zephyrians, and Shadowstrikes, and developing new protocols for shared decision-making about Zephyria's ecosystem. "It won't be easy," Izzy admitted. "We'll need to overcome centuries of fear and misunderstanding. We'll need to find ways to communicate complex ideas across vastly different species. But I believe it's possible." Dr. Hart, who had been listening thoughtfully, finally spoke. "It's an enormous undertaking with no guarantee of success, but I think it might be our best path forward." As the team continued to discuss the logistics and challenges of this new approach, Ava pulled Izzy aside. "You realize what you're proposing goes far beyond our original mission, right? This could change the very nature of interspecies relations, not just on Zephyria, but potentially across the galaxy." Izzy nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "I know. But after everything we've learned, how can we do anything less?" Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly to develop a comprehensive plan for this new approach. Izzy, with her unique bond with Shade, would play a key role in initiating contact with Shadowstrike communities. Ava would use her diplomatic skills to facilitate discussions, and help navigate the complex cultural differences. The proposal was met with skepticism and resistance from some quarters. Many Zephyrians struggled to overcome generations of fear and mistrust towards the Shadow Strikes. Some human officials worried about the implications for future interstellar relations. But as news of the Shadow Strike's intelligence spread, so did support for a more equitable approach. Scientists, ethicists, and rights advocates from both Earth and Zephyria began to rally behind the idea of a three-species collaboration. As the team prepared to embark on this new phase of their mission, Izzy found herself standing once again at the observation window, looking out over the alien landscape. The enormity of what they were attempting weighed heavily on her mind. "Are we really ready for this?" she murmured to herself. As if in answer, she caught sight of a group of shadow strikes moving through the distant forest. Their bodies shimmered with complex patterns of light, a visible reminder of the intelligence and potential for understanding that had been there all along, waiting to be recognized. Izzy squared her shoulders, a sense of determination replacing her doubts. They had come to Zephyria to bridge a gap, but they had found something far more profound: the opportunity to forge a new kind of interstellar community. One based on mutual respect and shared understanding between vastly different forms of sentient life. As she turned away from the window to join her team in their preparations, Izzy knew that the greatest challenges and the greatest possibilities still lay ahead. But for the first time since their arrival on this alien world, she felt truly hopeful about the future they were working to create. The day of the first official trilateral meeting between humans, Zephyrians, and Shadow Strikes dawned with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The team had spent weeks preparing, developing new communication protocols, and designing a neutral space that would accommodate all three species comfortably. As Izzy made her final preparations, she couldn't shake a sense of unease. Despite their best efforts, tensions remained high. Many Zephyrians were still wary of the Shadow Strikes, while the apex predators themselves seemed uncertain about this new dynamic. The meeting was to take place in a large, open-air amphitheater constructed at the edge of the Biolite forest. Luke Donovan had outdone himself, creating an environment that blended advanced technology with natural elements to cater to the needs of all participants. As the delegates began to arrive, Izzy took her position alongside Zorvax Cree and Ava Mitchell. The Zephyrian contingent, led by Zalara Thrin, entered first, their biolite patches pulsing with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Then, with a grace that still took Izzy's breath away, the Shadow Strikes emerged from the forest. Shade was at the forefront, its liquid-like body rippling with complex patterns that Izzy had learned to recognize as a greeting. For a moment, it seemed as though everything would proceed smoothly. But as the Shadow Strikes approached the center of the amphitheater, a commotion erupted from the Zephyrian side. A group of hardliners, opposed to the idea of treating the apex predators as equals, began shouting and advancing aggressively. Izzy's heart raced as she saw the Shadow Strikes tense, their bodies shifting into defensive postures. Years of ingrained fear and mistrust threatened to unravel everything they had worked for in a matter of seconds. Without hesitation, Izzy sprang into action. Drawing on her deep understanding of both Zephyrian and Shadow Strike behavior, she positioned herself between the two groups. Her body language was carefully calibrated, non-threatening yet firm, a bridge between two worlds. "Everyone, please," she called out, her voice amplified by Luke's sound system. "Remember why we're here. This is our chance to move beyond the past, to forge a new future together." As she spoke, Izzy began to emit a series of low, thrumming vocalizations, a Shadow Strike calming signal she had learned from Shade. Simultaneously, her suit's biolite patterns pulsed in a rhythm that conveyed reassurance to the Zephyrians. Zorvax Cree, recognizing the critical nature of the moment, stepped forward to address his fellow Zephyrians. "My friends, I understand your fear. For generations, we have seen the Shadow Strikes as a threat. But today, we have the opportunity to see them as they truly are: intelligent beings with whom we share this world." As Zorvax spoke, Luke Donovan activated a series of holographic displays around the amphitheater. They showed images and data from their research evidence of the Shadow Strike's intelligence, their complex social structures, and the ways in which their presence was vital to Zephyria's ecosystem. The combination of Izzy's calming presence, Zorvax's words, and Luke's visual aids began to have an effect. The tension in the air slowly dissipated as both Zephyrians and Shadowstrikes relaxed their defensive postures. Seizing the moment, Shade stepped forward. Using the communication techniques they had developed together, the Shadowstrike began to convey a message that Izzy translated for all present. "We have lived alongside you for millennia," Izzy interpreted, her voice filled with emotion. "We have watched your cities grow, your technology advance. We have also witnessed the damage done to our shared world. We do not seek conflict. We seek understanding and a chance to heal the rifts between us and the land we all call home." As Shade's message sank in, a hush fell over the amphitheater. Izzy held her breath, watching as Zephyrians and Shadowstrikes regarded each other with new eyes. Then, in a moment that would be remembered for generations to come, Zalara Thrin stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately, she extended a hand towards Shade. The Shadowstrike, understanding the significance of the gesture, gently touched its liquid-like form to Zalara's outstretched palm. A collective gasp rose from the assembled delegates. This simple act of trust and recognition symbolized the beginning of a new era for Zephyria. As the initial shock wore off, the atmosphere in the amphitheater transformed. Zephyrians and Shadowstrikes began to mingle, attempting to communicate with each other using the protocols developed by the research team. The air buzzed with a mixture of vocalizations, biolight displays, and translated speech. Izzy, watching the scene unfold, felt a surge of hope and accomplishment. They had done it. Against all odds, they had brought three vastly different species together in a spirit of cooperation and mutual understanding. As the historic meeting continued, plans began to take shape for the future of Zephyria. Ideas were proposed for shared habitats, collaborative environmental restoration projects, and educational initiatives to foster understanding between all three species. Luke Donovan, his eyes shining with excitement, was already sketching designs for new types of structures that could accommodate both Zephyrian and Shadowstrike physiologies. Zorvax Kree and Zalara Thrin were deep in discussion about revising Zephyrian laws and policies to reflect their new understanding of the Shadowstrike's sentience. As the sun began to set on this momentous day, Izzy found a quiet moment to reflect. She watched as humans, Zephyrians, and Shadowstrikes worked together, communicating across vast biological and cultural divides. It was far from perfect. Misunderstandings still occurred, and centuries of mistrust couldn't be erased in a day. But it was a beginning, a first step towards a truly integrated, multi-species society. Shade approached Izzy, its body rippling with patterns she now recognized as contentment and gratitude. As they stood side by side, watching the birth of this unprecedented alliance, Izzy felt a profound sense of accomplishment and hope for the future. They had come to Zephyria to help the aliens with their predator problem. Instead, they had stumbled upon something far greater: the chance to reshape the very nature of interspecies relations across the galaxy. As the biolight forest began to glow in the gathering dusk, Izzy knew that their greatest adventures still lay ahead, in the new world they were building together. In the months following the historic trilateral meeting, Zephyria became a living laboratory for interspecies cooperation. The once rigid boundaries between human, Zephyrian, and Shadowstrike territories began to blur, replaced by collaborative zones where all three species worked and lived together. Izzy found herself at the heart of this transformation, her unique ability to bridge the communication gap between species making her an invaluable facilitator. Her days were filled with a whirlwind of activities, from mediating disputes to helping translate complex scientific concepts across species lines. One particularly memorable project involved the restoration of a degraded ecosystem on the outskirts of a major Zephyrian city. Izzy watched with pride as Shadowstrikes used their innate understanding of the local flora to guide Zephyrian botanists in replanting efforts, while human environmental engineers provided technical support. "It's amazing," Dr. Hart remarked as they observed the collaborative effort. "Each species brings a unique perspective and set of skills. Together, They're achieving results that none could have managed alone. Izzy nodded, a smile playing on her lips. It's like watching evolution in fast forward. We're not just coexisting, we're co-evolving. Central to these efforts was the groundbreaking work of Orion Pax, a brilliant human-Zephyrian hybrid tech specialist who had joined the team. Orion's unique heritage allowed him to approach problems from multiple angles, resulting in technological innovations that were reshaping life on Zephyria. One of Orion's most impactful creations was the Tri-Species Interface, or TSI. This remarkable device combined holographic displays, advanced AI, and bio-responsive materials to facilitate real-time communication between humans, Zephyrians, and Shadowstrikes. The TSI doesn't just translate words, Orion explained during a demonstration. It interprets intent, emotional states, and even abstract concepts across vastly different neurological frameworks. Izzy watched in awe as a complex discussion about atmospheric composition unfolded between a human climatologist, a Zephyrian environmental engineer, and a Shadowstrike elder. The TSI seamlessly converted human speech into Zephyrian biolite patterns and Shadowstrike fluid body movements, and vice versa. This is revolutionary, Izzy breathed, her mind racing with the possibilities. With this level of communication, there's no limit to what we can achieve together. As the weeks passed, unforeseen benefits of the alliance began to emerge. The Shadowstrike's deep, instinctual understanding of Zephyria's ecosystems proved invaluable in efforts to restore balance to areas damaged by centuries of Zephyrian industrialization. In return, Zephyrian technology, enhanced by human innovations, helped create protected habitats that allowed Shadowstrike populations to thrive. One particularly exciting development came in the field of medicine. The unique biology of the Shadowstrikes, with their ability to rapidly adapt to environmental changes, held the key to breakthroughs in treating previously incurable Zephyrian diseases. It's ironic, Zalara mused during a research briefing. For so long, we feared the Shadowstrikes as harbingers of death. Now, they're helping us save lives. But perhaps the most profound changes were cultural. As the three species learned to work and live together, new forms of art, music, and philosophy began to emerge. Izzy found herself moved to tears at the premiere of a tri-species symphony, where human instruments, Zephyrian biolite displays, and Shadowstrike fluid form movements combined to create something hauntingly beautiful and entirely new. Not everything was smooth sailing, of course. Centuries of mistrust and misunderstanding couldn't be erased overnight. There were still incidents of conflict, moments of fear and prejudice from all sides. But with each challenge overcome, each misunderstanding resolved, the bonds between the species grew stronger. Izzy's role evolved as well. While she still spent much of her time in the field, facilitating direct interactions, she also found herself increasingly involved in policy discussions and long-term planning. The unique perspective she had gained through her deep connections with all three species made her insights invaluable. One evening, as Izzy stood on the balcony of the newly constructed Tri-Species Cooperation Center, she reflected on how far they had come. The cityscape before her was a testament to their progress. Zephyrian spires intertwined with human-style structures and organic Shadowstrike habitats, all coexisting in harmony. Shade, who had become a constant companion and valued advisor, joined her on the balcony. Its fluid form rippled with patterns that Izzy now recognized as contentment and pride. "We've achieved so much," Izzy said softly, more to herself than to Shade. "But I can't help feeling like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible." Shade's response, translated through her personal sigh, was thoughtful. "Each day brings new understanding, new connections. The path ahead is long, but we walk it together." As if to emphasize this point, a group of young Zephyrians, humans, in Shadowstrikes passed by below, engaged in animated conversation. Their easy camaraderie, so unthinkable just months ago, filled Izzy with hope for the future. Yet even as she celebrated their progress, Izzy knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The news of Zephyria's transformation had spread across the galaxy, drawing attention from other species and civilizations. Some were intrigued by the possibilities of multi-species cooperation, while others viewed the alliance with suspicion or even hostility. As Izzy turned her gaze to the star-filled sky, she knew that their work on Zephyria was just the beginning. The principles of cooperation and mutual understanding they had established here could reshape interstellar relations across the galaxy. But first, they would need to prove that their alliance could withstand the pressures and challenges of a wider cosmic community. With renewed determination, Izzy headed back inside. There was much work to be done, but for the first time, she felt truly confident that together human, Zephyrian, and Shadowstrike they could face whatever the universe had in store for them. As news of Zephyria's successful tri-species alliance spread, attention inevitably turned to the next logical step: introducing alien life to Earth. The prospect was both exhilarating and daunting, filled with potential for both unprecedented advancement and unforeseen complications. Izzy found herself at the forefront of this monumental undertaking, her unique experience and rapport with both Zephyrians and Shadowstrikes making her the ideal candidate to lead the preparation efforts. Working closely with Maya Sterling, Earth's chief diplomat for extraterrestrial affairs, and Elijah Quarn, the Zephyrian cultural exchange officer, Izzy set about crafting a comprehensive plan for this historic introduction. "We need to approach this with the utmost care and consideration," Izzy emphasized during one of their planning sessions. "We're not just introducing new species, we're introducing entire civilizations, with their own cultures, philosophies, and ways of life." Maya nodded in agreement, her diplomatic experience evident in her measured response. "The political implications alone are staggering. We need to ensure that all Earth nations are prepared and on board with this initiative." Elijah's BioLite patches pulsed with a mix of excitement and concern. "And we must be mindful of the potential impact on both Zephyrian and Earth ecosystems. We cannot risk a repeat of the unintended consequences we faced on Zephyria." The team worked tirelessly, developing protocols for everything from quarantine procedures to cultural sensitivity training. They created detailed educational materials to prepare Earth's population for the arrival of their new galactic neighbors. Izzy insisted on a gradual approach, advocating for small-scale exchanges and controlled interactions before any large-scale migration or tourism could be considered. One of the most challenging aspects of the preparation was addressing the potential fears and misconceptions that humans might have about the alien visitors, particularly the Shadowstrikes. Izzy worked with psychologists and sociologists to develop strategies for easing humanity into this new paradigm. "We need to emphasize the intelligence and cultural richness of both Zephyrians and Shadowstrikes," Izzy explained during a briefing with Earth's leaders. "It's crucial that they're seen as sentient beings with their own complex societies, not just as exotic aliens or, worse, potential threats." As the preparations progressed, Izzy couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and anxiety about humanity's reaction. She knew firsthand the transformative power of interspecies cooperation, but she also remembered the fear and mistrust that had initially characterized relations on Zephyria. "What if we're moving too fast?" she confided to Maya one evening, after a particularly grueling planning session. "What if Earth isn't ready for this level of change?" Maya placed a reassuring hand on Izzy's shoulder. "Change is never easy, but it's necessary for growth. Remember, humanity has faced paradigm shifts before. We've adapted, evolved. This is just the next step in our cosmic journey." Encouraged by Maya's words, Izzy threw herself into the final stages of preparation with renewed vigor. She worked with Orion Pax to adapt the tri-species interface for Earth use, ensuring that communication barriers would be minimized from the outset. She collaborated with Earth's top scientists to establish safe zones where Zephyrian and Shadowstrike biology could be accommodated without risk to local ecosystems. One of Izzy's most innovative contributions was the concept of ambassador pairs, carefully selected teams consisting of one human and one alien, either Zephyrian or Shadowstrike, who would work together to facilitate understanding and integration. These pairs would be deployed to key locations around the globe, serving as living examples of interspecies cooperation. As the date for the first official Earth-Zephyria Shadow Strikes Summit on Earth approached, Izzy found herself reflecting on the incredible journey that had led to this moment. She thought back to her first encounter with Zalara and Zorvax in Central Park, how she could never have imagined the path that lay ahead. The night before the summit, Izzy stood on the balcony of her New York apartment, gazing up at the stars. Shade, who had insisted on accompanying her to Earth as a Shadow Strike representative, joined her, its fluid form rippling with patterns of anticipation and solidarity. "Are we ready for this?" Izzy asked, more to herself than to Shade. The Shadow Strike's response, translated through the sigh, was characteristically profound. Readiness is not about perfect preparation, but about willingness to adapt and grow. Your species has shown great capacity for both. Izzy smiled, drawing strength from Shade's wisdom. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging. There would be setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments of fear. But she also knew the incredible potential that lay in bringing these three species together on a global scale. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Izzy felt a surge of determination. They had achieved the impossible on Zephyria, forging an alliance that had transformed an entire world. Now, they had the opportunity to do the same for Earth, to open humanity's eyes to the vast and wondrous diversity of the cosmos. With a deep breath, Izzy turned from the balcony and began to prepare for the day ahead. In a few hours, she would stand before the leaders of Earth and introduce them to their new galactic neighbors. It was a responsibility that weighed heavily on her shoulders, but also filled her with an unshakable sense of purpose. As she donned her ceremonial attire, a blend of human, Zephyrian, and Shadow Strike design elements, Izzy caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her was a far cry from the carefree dog walker who had stumbled into first contact in Central Park. She had been transformed by her experiences, shaped by the challenges and triumphs of bridging the gap between worlds. With Shade at her side, Izzy left her apartment, ready to usher in a new era for humanity. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew that together human, Zephyrian, and Shadow Strike they could face them. The future was uncertain, but it was also filled with limitless possibilities, and Izzy was ready to embrace it with open arms. The day of the historic arrival dawned clear and bright, a perfect backdrop for an event that would forever change the course of human history. New York City, chosen as the site for this momentous occasion, buzzed with an energy unlike anything it had ever experienced before. Central Park, where Izzy's extraordinary journey had begun, had been transformed into a grand welcoming area. A sleek, otherworldly ship hovered silently above the great lawn, its iridescent hull shimmering in the morning sun. Around it, a sea of faces, human, alien, and digital, waited with bated breath. Izzy stood at the forefront of the welcoming committee, flanked by Tarazi Mir, the young Zephyrian biologist who had become a key figure in interspecies relations, and Dr. Julian Hart, whose scientific expertise had been instrumental in preparing Earth for this moment. Despite the years of preparation and her extensive experience as an interstellar diplomat, Izzy felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. "Ready?" Dr. Hart asked, his voice low and reassuring. Izzy nodded, squaring her shoulders. "As will ever be." As if on cue, a hatch on the alien ship began to open. A hush fell over the crowd, punctuated only by the whir of cameras and the soft hum of the tri-species interfaces that had been distributed among the human attendees. The first to emerge was Zalara Thrin, her biolite patches pulsing with a complex mix of emotions that the size translated as excitement, apprehension, and hope. She was followed by a group of Zephyrian dignitaries, each step they took on Earth's soil captured and broadcast to billions around the world. But it was the next group of arrivals that truly captured the world's attention. A group of Shadow Strikes, led by Shade, flowed out of the ship with liquid grace. Their multiple eyes scanned the crowd, their bodies shimmering with patterns that conveyed curiosity and a touch of wariness. Izzy felt a lump form in her throat as she watched Shade take its first steps on Earth. This was the culmination of years of work, the realization of a dream that had once seemed impossible. As the alien delegates assembled before the welcoming committee, Izzy stepped forward. Her voice, amplified by hidden microphones, rang out clear and strong. "On behalf of the people of Earth, I bid you welcome," she began. Her words simultaneously translated into Zephyrian biolite patterns and shadowstrike fluid form movements by the size. Today marks not just the meeting of different worlds, but the beginning of a new chapter in the story of life in our universe. As Izzy continued her speech, Tarazi Mir moved among the Zephyrian delegates, her intimate understanding of both human and Zephyrian culture helping to ease any tensions or misunderstandings. Dr. Hart, meanwhile, coordinated with a team of scientists, monitoring for any unforeseen biological interactions between the alien visitors and Earth's environment. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, a testament to the years of careful planning and preparation. But it was during the less formal interactions that followed that the true magic of the moment became apparent. Izzy watched with joy as curious humans cautiously approached the shadowstrikes, their initial fear giving way to wonder as they communicated through the sighs. Children, less encumbered by preconceptions, were particularly quick to warm up to the alien visitors, their laughter mixing with the melodic tones of Zephyrian speech and the low thrums of shadowstrike vocalizations. One particularly touching moment came when a young girl, no more than 6 years old, approached Shade. Without hesitation, she held out her hand in greeting, mimicking the gesture she had seen Izzy use. Shade, understanding the significance of the moment, gently extended a fluid tendril to touch the girl's palm. The interaction, captured by countless cameras, would become an iconic image of the day, a symbol of the innocent curiosity and openness that Izzy hoped would characterize this new era of interspecies relations. As the day progressed, Izzy found herself constantly on the move, mediating discussions, explaining cultural nuances, and ensuring that both the alien visitors and the human hosts felt comfortable and understood. It was exhausting work, but deeply rewarding. "You've done it, Izzy," Dr. Hart said during a brief lull in the activities. "You've brought 3 worlds together." Izzy smiled, touched by his words, but shook her head. "We've done it," she corrected. "All of us, working together, and this is just the beginning." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Izzy took a moment to step back and observe the scene. Humans, Zephyrians, and shadowstrikes mingled freely, engaged in conversations that spanned topics from philosophy to art to the nature of the cosmos itself. It was a vision of unity and mutual curiosity that surpassed even her most optimistic hopes. But even as she celebrated this triumph, Izzy was acutely aware of the challenges that lay ahead. Integrating 3 vastly different species on a global scale would be a monumental task, fraught with potential pitfalls and unforeseen complications. As if sensing her thoughts, Tarazi Mir approached, her biolite patches pulsing with a pattern that Izzy had come to recognize as determination. "We have much work ahead of us," Tarazi said, her words translated smoothly by the Tsai. Izzy nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Indeed we do. But after today, I truly believe anything is possible." As night fell on this historic day, Izzy looked up at the star-filled sky, now filled with new meaning and possibility. The universe had opened up to humanity in ways she could never have imagined when she first encountered Zalara and Zorvax in this very park. The path ahead was uncertain, but Izzy felt ready to face whatever challenges it might bring. With the combined wisdom, creativity, and resilience of 3 remarkable species, she knew that they could overcome any obstacle. As she turned to rejoin the ongoing celebrations, Izzy felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope. They had taken the first steps towards a truly interstellar community, and the journey ahead promised to be the greatest adventure of all. In the months following the historic arrival, the world underwent a transformation unlike any in human history. The presence of Zephyrians and shadowstrikes on Earth catalyzed a global paradigm shift, reshaping humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. Izzy found herself at the epicenter of this change, her role evolving from diplomat to visionary leader in the emerging field of interstellar relations. Working closely with Kai Morgan, whose technological expertise had become invaluable in facilitating cross-species communication, and Lumiara Voss, a brilliant xenobiologist pushing the boundaries of interspecies medical research. Izzy spearheaded initiatives that would redefine humanity's future. The impact of the alien arrival was felt in every aspect of society. Education systems worldwide underwent rapid overhauls, incorporating xenobiology, interstellar ethics, and multi-species communication into standard curricula. Izzy worked tirelessly with educational boards to develop programs that would prepare the next generation for life in a broader cosmic community. "We're not just teaching facts and figures," Izzy explained during a global education summit. "We're cultivating a mindset of cosmic citizenship, an understanding that our responsibilities and opportunities now extend beyond the boundaries of our planet." In the scientific community, the influx of alien knowledge and perspectives led to unprecedented breakthroughs. Lumiara Voss's work in xenobiology opened up new avenues in medicine, with Shadowstrike adaptive biology providing insights into treating previously incurable human diseases. "It's a new frontier in medical science," Lumiara enthused during a presentation at a packed conference hall. "The Shadowstrike's ability to rapidly adapt to environmental changes holds the key to revolutionizing our approach to genetic therapies and cellular regeneration." Meanwhile, Kai Morgan's advancements in cross-species communication technology were reshaping global connectivity. The tri-species interface, once a tool for basic translation, evolved into a sophisticated network facilitating real-time, nuanced communication across vast interstellar distances. "We're not just breaking down language barriers," Kai explained to Izzy as they tested a new prototype. "We're creating a framework for sharing thoughts, emotions, and even abstract concepts across fundamentally different neurological structures." The economic landscape underwent a seismic shift as well. New industries emerged, focused on interstellar trade, xenotourism, and the development of technologies that could operate across diverse planetary environments. Izzy found herself frequently mediating discussions between Earth's business leaders and their alien counterparts, working to establish fair and ethical practices in this new cosmic marketplace. However, the transition was not without its challenges. Despite the overall positive reception, pockets of resistance emerged. Some groups, driven by fear or ideology, protested against the alien presence on Earth. Izzy worked closely with global leaders and alien representatives to address these concerns, always emphasizing education and open dialogue. "Change on this scale is never easy," Izzy acknowledged during a particularly tense town hall meeting. "But it's through facing these challenges together, human and alien alike, that we grow and evolve as a cosmic society." One of Izzy's most significant contributions during this period was the establishment of the Interstellar Cultural Exchange Program. This initiative facilitated long-term exchanges between humans, Zephyrians, and Shadowstrikes, allowing individuals to live and work in each other's societies for extended periods. "Understanding comes through immersion," Izzy explained to a group of eager participants. "By living in each other's worlds, we break down preconceptions and build lasting bonds of empathy and mutual respect." As the program flourished, stories of transformative experiences began to emerge. Humans returned from Zephyria with new perspectives on environmental stewardship, inspired by the planet's complex ecosystem. Zephyrians embraced human arts and philosophy, infusing their own culture with new ideas. Even the Shadowstrikes, once seen as inscrutable predators, revealed depths of emotional and intellectual complexity that astounded their human hosts. Throughout it all, Izzy's unique ability to bridge the gaps between species made her an indispensable figure in shaping interstellar relations. Her days were filled with a whirlwind of activities, from mediating high-level diplomatic discussions to giving inspiring talks at schools, from collaborating on cutting-edge scientific research to drafting policies for ethical interstellar exploration. One evening, as Izzy stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Interstellar Cooperation Center in New York, she reflected on the incredible journey that had led to this moment. The cityscape before her was a testament to the changes Earth had undergone. Zephyrian architecture blended seamlessly with human structures, while specially designed habitats allowed Shadowstrikes to flow freely through designated areas. Kai joined her, his eyes alight with excitement as he shared the latest breakthrough in their communication technology. "We're on the verge of something big, Izzy. The next iteration of the HFY could potentially allow for the sharing of sensory experiences across species. Imagine being able to see through a shadow strike's multiple eyes, or feel a Zephyrian's biolight communication." Izzy smiled, her mind racing with the possibilities. "It's incredible how far we've come, and yet it feels like we're still just at the beginning." As they discussed the implications of this new technology, Lumiara burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. "You won't believe what we've just discovered in our latest xenobiology study," she exclaimed. "The Shadow Strike's adaptive abilities, we think we can apply them to space travel, potentially allowing biological organisms to survive in environments we never thought possible." As Izzy absorbed this news, she felt a familiar surge of wonder and determination. Every day brought new discoveries, new challenges, and new opportunities to bring their diverse species closer together. Looking out at the star-filled sky, Izzy knew that their work was far from over. The integration of 3 species on Earth was just the first step. Out there, in the vast expanse of the cosmos, other civilizations awaited discovery. The principles of cooperation and mutual understanding that they had established here would be crucial as humanity took its place in the larger galactic community. With renewed purpose, Izzy turned to her colleagues. "All right, team, we've got a universe of possibilities ahead of us. Let's get to work." As they delved into discussions of their latest projects, Izzy felt a profound sense of gratitude and excitement. The journey that had begun with a chance encounter in Central Park had led to the dawn of a new era for humanity and its alien allies. And with each passing day, the boundaries of what was possible continued to expand, promising a future filled with wonders beyond imagination. As Izzy stood on the launch pad of the newly christened interstellar exploration vessel Harmony, she couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought her to this moment. The sleek ship before her was a testament to the collaborative efforts of humans, Zephyrians, and Shadow Strike's a physical embodiment of the alliance they had forged. Memories flooded her mind, that fateful day in Central Park when she first encountered Zilara and Zorvax, the tense early days on Zephyria, the breakthrough with Shade, and the monumental task of introducing alien life to Earth. Each step had been a challenge, each triumph a shared victory that had pushed the boundaries of what they thought possible. Izzy's personal growth had mirrored humanity's evolution in many ways. She had started as a curious but naive dog walker, thrust into a role she never could have imagined. Now, she stood as a respected interstellar diplomat and xenobiologist, her understanding of the cosmos and its myriad life forms far beyond what she once thought possible. "Reflective mood?" a familiar voice asked. Izzy turned to see Drakkar Ven, the Zephyrian exobiologist who had become one of her closest friends and collaborators. His biolight patches pulsed with a pattern that the years had taught Izzy to read as fond amusement. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Izzy replied with a smile. "Remember when the idea of Zephyrians and Shadow Strikes coexisting peacefully seemed impossible? And now look at us about to embark on a joint mission to explore new worlds." Drakkar's patches shifted to a pattern of agreement and excitement. "Indeed, our alliance has opened up possibilities we never dreamed of. The combined knowledge and abilities of our 3 species give us an unprecedented advantage in exploring the galaxy." As they spoke, a group of crew members passed by, a mix of humans, Zephyrians, and Shadow Strikes, all working in seamless coordination. It was a sight that still filled Izzy with wonder, even after all these years. "Dr. Reyes, Dr. Ven," one of the human crew members called out. "Final preparations are complete. We're ready for the mission briefing." Izzy nodded, feeling a familiar thrill of anticipation. This mission was the culmination of years of preparation and the beginning of a new chapter in their interstellar alliance. They were venturing into uncharted regions of the galaxy, seeking out new life forms and civilizations. As they made their way to the briefing room, Izzy reflected on how humanity had changed. The initial fear and skepticism towards alien life had given way to a sense of cosmic citizenship. Earth had become a hub of interstellar activity, with exchange programs, collaborative research initiatives, and diplomatic missions constantly pushing the boundaries of their collective knowledge. The briefing room was a microcosm of their alliance. Humans sat alongside Zephyrians, while shadow strikes flowed gracefully around the room. Their fluid forms adapted to the ship's artificial gravity. Advanced holographic displays showcased the mission objectives and the strange new worlds they hoped to explore. As Izzy began the briefing, she felt a surge of pride in how far they had come. "Our mission," she explained, "is to explore a cluster of potentially habitable planets in the Andromeda Galaxy. Our preliminary scans have detected biosignatures unlike anything we've encountered before." Drakkar took over, his biolite patterns translating seamlessly through the ship's advanced tri-species interface. "We believe these planets may host life forms that defy our current understanding of biology. The potential for new xenobiological discoveries is enormous." The excitement in the room was palpable as Izzy and Drakkar outlined the mission parameters. They discussed the unique challenges they might face and how the diverse abilities of their crew would be crucial to their success. As the briefing concluded and the crew dispersed to make final preparations, Izzy found herself once again standing before the viewing window, gazing out at the stars. Each point of light represented potential new wonders, new life forms, new challenges to overcome. "Ready for our next great adventure?" Drakkar asked, joining her at the window. Izzy smiled, feeling a familiar mix of excitement and determination. "More than ready. Who knows what we'll discover out there? New forms of intelligence, ecosystems we can't even imagine. Maybe even clues to the origins of life itself." As they stood there, on the brink of a new journey, Izzy reflected on the transformative power of understanding and cooperation. What had begun as a mission to help aliens with their predator problem had blossomed into an alliance that was reshaping the galaxy. The ship's engines hummed to life, a soft vibration running through the deck. It was time to embark on their next great adventure. As Izzy took her place on the bridge, surrounded by the diverse crew she had come to see as family, she felt a profound sense of purpose. They had overcome the barriers between species, between worlds. Now, they were poised to push the boundaries of known space, to seek out new life and new civilizations. The galaxy awaited, filled with wonders beyond imagination. As the Harmony lifted off, its hull shimmering with the combined technologies of three worlds, Izzy knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Human, Zephyrian, and Shadowstrike, three species united in their quest for knowledge and understanding. The stars beckoned, promising new discoveries, new alliances, and new wonders. And Izzy, once a simple dog walker from New York, now a pioneer of interstellar exploration, was ready to meet them head-on. As the Earth receded behind them and the vast expanse of space opened up before them, Izzy felt a thrill of anticipation. Their greatest adventure was just beginning, and the universe, in all its infinite mystery and beauty, was waiting to be explored.